windier as we head through the rest of Monday. Particularly going to be turning quite windy through the Irish Sea, gales arriving here through the afternoon, and we have a rain warning in force as well for parts of southwest Scotland. Under that cloud and rain, we're going to be seeing temperatures at best in the mid or high teens, but it will be still quite warm across southeast England. Heading through the rest of the day, we do still have some warm evening sunshine on offer for the southeast of England, but we already have some quite heavy showery rain moving into southwest England and to Wales as well. Very damp across Northern Ireland and north west England, and this is where we have the warning in force across southwest Scotland through this evening. Difficult driving conditions with that rain as well. A touch lighter across the northeast, but again it's going to be a damp evening for most with that strong wind as well. Through the rest of Monday evening, that rain's going to continue to sink south and eastwards as we head through the evening, and it will turn a little bit clearer from the west, but still with some blustery showers moving in as well. Rain may take a little while to clear across the southeast and the far northeast of Scotland, and with those cloudier conditions and that strong wind, temperatures will be more in the mid-teens, a little bit higher than we've seen the last couple of days. Then through the rest of Tuesday, it'll be bright sunny spells, but also some heavy showers too, particularly for parts of central and northern England, and Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland will be seeing heavy blustery showers as well, particularly windy across the far northwest of Scotland too. Temperatures here again in the mid or high teens and feeling quite cool, but the further southeast is still going to be feeling quite warm in that sun.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am, having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 19th of August. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Emma Webb.
Super yacht disaster. 1 dead and 6 missing after a yacht carrying mostly British passengers is caught in a tornado and capsizes off the coast of Italy. We'll bring you the latest.
And Operation Early Dawn, an emergency plan to avoid overcrowding in jails, has been triggered this morning, the government has announced, in the wake of the speedy sentencing of those involved in recent violent disorder.
And giving in to the unions, Starmer is accused of capitulating to trade union bosses as it's revealed more than half of Labour MPs took donations from unions ahead of the election. Plus, Starmer plans to make it easier for trade unions to strike.
And Royal Rumble. Prince Andrew is under increasing pressure to leave his royal lodge home after reports the King has laid off the Duke of York's security team.
And something else we want to get your views on today is the latest polling for Sir Keir Starmer. It's not looking particularly rosy for him. It does seem that in terms of his personal popularity, that's taken quite a dramatic tumble. Also, the popularity of the cabinet as a whole. 52% of people now think the country is moving in the wrong direction. So I guess we're asking, do you think some Labour voters will have buyer's remorse?
Yeah, I think a few people out there might be regretting their decision. If you at home did vote for Labour and are now regretting it, or perhaps you don't regret it, be interesting to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of it, I mean, it hasn't been very long that he's been in office.
I know, but it's been a bad start,
It's been a short honeymoon.
Rocky few weeks.
A rocky few weeks, I think, for the new administration. But, I mean, it is quite telling, perhaps, that the drop in favourability for him and also his cabinet has taken such a nosedive.
But I think it's also, I mean, he kind of went into the election making out that he's almost like Tory light. And I think people, they've sort of branded themselves as being patriotic. Don't worry, we're not woke, we're not too far to the left, we're a moderate Labour Party. And I think now people have seen it that they've immediately put their foot to the floor and are racing ahead with all of these quite controversial decisions, many of which we'll be discussing today. And I think maybe it's not just the handling of the riots, but also that the Labour government, perhaps people voted against the Tories and have only now just realised that they voted for the Labour Party.
Yes, and taking away the winter fuel allowance probably came as a shock to some of you, at least. Anyway, let us know, gbnews.com/your say. Get your thoughts coming in. But let's get the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 12 o'clock and the top story this lunchtime. Well, it's breaking news from Sicily that 1 person has died, 6 still missing, after a luxury yacht sank off the coast of Palermo when it was struck by a tornado at sunrise. The British registered 56-metre Bayesian had 22 people on board, including 12 passengers, 10 crew. They were British, American and Canadian nationals. 15 survivors, including a 1-year-old child, were rescued and are now in a stable condition. Meanwhile, divers are still combing the waters as search efforts continue around the wreck. A warning for those watching on television, this is some distressing footage of one of those bodies being recovered, that one body so far that has been found. The ship now lies 50 metres deep and half a mile off of the coast. Well, as we look at these pictures from the scene, let's hear from meteorologist Jim Dale, who told us this morning the weather in the area was treacherous.
It was a danger zone, so I don't know what the situation was on this particular yacht, whether they had a meteorologist on board or anybody who was trained. But sometimes these things do occur, particularly this type of event. A water spout is quite unusual, so if it hit directly, then it would have been a little bit of a, let's just say, a catastrophic impact, and obviously has been.
And staying with that story just for a moment, an update from the Foreign Office. We've now received a statement saying that they are in contact with local authorities following that incident in Sicily. They say they are standing ready to provide any support to the British nationals that are affected. Any more details on that, we will bring that straight to you. But for now, that latest statement from the Foreign Office. Well, in other news, in Manchester, a 43-year-old woman has died and 2 others are in a critical condition following a triple stabbing in Manchester. A 22-year-old man, believed to be known to those victims, has been arrested on suspicion of murder. He remains in custody. Greater Manchester Police are now appealing for witnesses as they continue their investigation into what they say is believed to be an isolated incident. There'll be no punishment for anyone safely handing zombie knives and machetes into police stations ahead of a new ban. Restrictions come into force next month, but the government at this stage has stopped short of making ninja swords illegal, insisting that will happen soon. Policing Minister Dame Deanna Johnson says the public should do the right thing and surrender any dangerous weapons, arguing there is no legitimate need to have them. Prisoner Minister Lord Timpson claims he's inherited a justice system in crisis to address overcrowding in jails that are activated in North England. Operation Early Dawn will see defendants who were remanded in custody waiting for a court appearance now held in police cells for slightly longer. It's separate, though, to the early release scheme for some offenders, which kicks in next month. More than half of people think Britain is heading in the wrong direction, as an opinion poll suggests a drop in support for the new Labour government. An equal percentage of adults have a favourable or unfavourable view of Sir Keir Starmer, with 38% of those surveys falling on both sides. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives' ratings haven't changed since the election. News just into us from the world of politics this lunchtime. The Tories' deputy chairman has resigned to back Robert Jenrick as the next Conservative Party leader. Matt Vickers previously backed Rishi Sunak in 2 leadership contests and now says that Jenrick is the standout candidate with, he says, a compelling vision for rebuilding the party. Turning to the US, America's top diplomat says now is a decisive moment to conclude a ceasefire deal in the Middle East between Israel and Gaza as he pushes for peace in the region. Antony Blinken has met the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem today. It's understood the pair discussed ongoing efforts to plan for a post-conflict period ahead of further talks in Egypt. The Prime Minister insists support for Ukraine is unwavering after Volodymyr Zelensky suggested that the UK backing for aid was slowing down. It comes after Ukrainian forces destroyed a second bridge in the Kursk region as forces continue their incursion into Russian territory. It's thought that move is aimed at creating a buffer zone between the two countries. Back to the US, and the Democratic National Convention's kicking off in Chicago later, where Kamala Harris will be officially announced as the party's nominee for the US presidential election. Last month, Donald Trump was confirmed as the Republicans' pick. That was just a few days after he survived an assassination attempt. Well, as Americans prepare to head to the polls in November, our correspondent in the US, Steve Edgington, says the DNC will be a critical test for the party.
This is unprecedented. There has been Democratic primaries or votes for their candidacy for the last, few decades. And this time around, Kamala Harris has not won any Democratic primaries. She's been installed as the candidate by essentially President Biden and Barack Obama. So this is a real key test for the Democrats. She's almost certainly going to get the candidacy. And she's also chosen her vice president nominee, Tim Walz.
And finally, the remnants of Hurricane Ernesto are set to batter parts of the UK this week, bringing winds of up to 60 miles an hour. A yellow weather warning for rain's been issued for Scotland. That covers the southwest of the country from this afternoon and the northwest for most of Wednesday and into Thursday too. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 12:09 and search and rescue efforts are underway after a British super yacht was hit by a tornado and sank off the coast of Sicily.
One person is known to have died and 6 people remain missing after the 50-metre sailboat with 22 people on board capsized in the early hours of the morning.
Well, GB News Home and Security editor Mark White joins us now in the studio. Mark, what's happened then?
Well, the latest news, which is very worrying from the scene, is that fire service, rescue personnel and dive teams have located what they've described as bodies inside the yacht. They're able to see them through the portholes of that yacht. It's lying some 50 feet down on the seabed. And you can see here, this is the fire service who are responsible for search and rescue operations across Italy, have been very proactive in the videos they've released so far today. And these are the dive teams, the specialist dive teams that have been brought to this location off the northern end of Sicily to begin the diving operations on that yacht. As I say, not been made easy by the fact that it is in 50 metres of water. It was 4:30, 5 a.m. this morning when severe weather in that area apparently spawned a water spout, which is effectively a tornado at sea, which then is believed to have struck this yacht and caused it to capsize and sink very quickly indeed. You can see the dive teams there, the helicopter hovering above as they prepare to go down. Now, the body of one man has been recovered from the sea, as well as those other bodies, and they've not quantified it in terms of how many bodies they've spotted inside the yacht. But the hope will be, as always, that there may be air pockets within that yacht, that there could be people still there and trapped. That's why the dive teams will be, as a matter of urgency now, trying to get into the yacht itself to check for any potential survivors.
And what do we know about the identities of these people? Because I know one of the survivors that has been rescued as a child, is that right?
Yes, the majority of those on the yacht were British. There were 22 people on this yacht. 12 of them were passengers, 10 were crew members, and the majority, as I say, are believed to be British. Now, that child that you spoke about, the 1-year-old baby girl, is believed to be British. Her mother has been speaking to local reporters in Italy, saying that they were thrown into the water. She lost sight of her baby girl momentarily, managed to grab onto her, cling onto her. The life raft, which had been tossed into the water, thankfully inflated, and 11 people were able to get onto that life raft and then transferred to another yacht that was just nearby that came to the rescue. And that baby is in hospital still in a stable condition. It was given some stitches to a wound on its chest, but the 1-year-old seems to be improving, according to doctors.
The photo's absolutely terrifying.
The weather there, yeah.
And so obviously the people who are on board this boat, presumably they're on holiday and would have been hit by this, as you put it, waterspout, tornado. I can't imagine how terrifying it is to see that approach. But obviously boats like, you know, large luxury yachts, like any other boat, would have certain safety kit. And you mentioned the life raft being thrown into the water. Presumably that would be very difficult for them to actually execute the safety procedures in.
Look at the conditions
on
screen. This is from the port around about the time of the sinking of this vessel, blowing an absolute storm. They've had a heat wave like much of Europe for many weeks in Italy. That's given way in recent days to some very bad weather, torrential rain and thunderstorms. And of course, it's these thunderstorms, the cumulus nimbo clouds, that spawn tornadoes and water spouts. And you were looking at that image before of a water spout. Now, that's appeared on social media with one particular weather channel reporting that this was taken off the coast. This photograph was taken off a weather spout off the coast at the time of this incident. We don't know if that is the water spout, but it is a good illustration of what the water spout is, and it is effectively a tornado at sea. They are just as powerful. So while they're at sea and they're sucking up water, it looks like a beautiful sight, but doesn't look as though it could be deadly. But if you come into contact with a water spout, the winds combined with the fact that it's sucking up water and rotating it at hundreds of miles an hour can just shatter a boat instantly. So they are very dangerous.
And this all happened at 5:30 a.m, so presumably quite a few of the passengers on board would have been asleep, which would make it all the more terrifying, and possibly quite, below the surface, perhaps they were staying as well. Very dangerous indeed. The mast, I've read, and I don't know if this has been verified, but this mast of this boat was the second tallest in the world, apparently. So that may have something to do with how, even though this boat was anchored and moored at a port, that this could have happened, and it could have capsized in such a dramatic way. Yeah,
I mean, it was an absolutely beautiful vessel. We've got some other pictures. I think we can show you some video of the boat in port that was taken quite recently, and there you see it. Sleek lines, very tall masts, as you said. We associate super yachts with what has been a corruption of super yachts in recent years, with these huge, great big monstrosities that are often owned by Russian billionaires and are not yachts at all, really. They're motorised vessels. This is a yacht in every sense of the word, with all the tall rigging and the masts there that can zip through the water. It's got an engine, of course, as well. But it is designed to go out onto the ocean wave, to catch the winds and to ride those winds at speed. And that's why it's got such a beautiful, sleek design. And inside, it is absolutely luxurious. It's advertised for lease on the super yacht websites, and it's a pretty penny.
Is it perhaps built more for speed than for safety, maybe?
Well, I'm sure that especially given just how expensive it is, it will be well prepared in safety terms for any potential eventuality. But if you're hit by a tornado at sea, a waterspout, and within seconds it's capsized your vessel, there's very little you can do. But as we were just talking about, that mother of the one-year-old girl was telling reporters that within seconds of them being catapulted into the sea, that life raft, that inflatable life raft, was self-inflating in the water. So clearly there was, some rescue and health and safety equipment on board to provide safety for, I think it was 11 people initially. Absolutely horrifying incident. Thank you very much indeed, Mark, for bringing us the very latest from that area of just near Palermo, really. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we're going to move on because emergency measures here in the UK to ease prison overcrowding have been activated by the Ministry of Justice after hundreds of rioters were charged for their role in the recent unrest.
And this means that defendants waiting across the north of England for a court appearance will be kept in police cells until prison space becomes available.
Yes, well, joining us now to make sense of this is our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. What exactly is this Operation Early Dawn? And I understand there are concerns that this could have knock-on effects for the entire criminal justice system.
Well, absolutely. So Operation Early Dawn, it isn't an initiative from this Labour government. It's a long-standing measure that is triggered when prisons become too overcrowded. And what it means, as you said in your introduction there, is that prisoners who is that people who've been arrested and are being held on remand can be held in police cells rather than in prisons. But what it does mean is that court hearings end up being adjourned or delayed right at the last minute, which which, as you say, can have huge knock-on effects on the entire justice sector. There are already massive bottlenecks of people waiting to have their court hearings, and if those get delayed or adjourned, we could just see that build up and up and up. This isn't a particularly unusual measure. The last time Operation Early Dawn was brought into effect was last May by the Conservative government, but obviously it's a very tricky situation that Labour finds itself in now because of all of those rioters. Over 1,000 people have now been arrested and nearly 500 of those have already been charged. That is what has put this extreme pressure on the prisons industry right now, and we're expecting, of course, for many more of that figure of 1,000 to be charged over the next few days and weeks, and that, of course, is if there aren't any more riots, and we can't say for sure that that is the case. This is a very tricky situation for Keir Starmer, and of course it feeds into another plan that the Labour government do have, which is separate from Operation Early Dawn. This is an initiative of this new Labour government to release prisoners early, to release prisoners after serving less than half of their sentence. Those measures are thought to come into effect in September and October and should help to ease overcrowding in prisons. But, of course, that will come with consequences. All journalists, definitely me, and I'm sure lots of others across the country, will be keeping a very close eye on what happens to those prisoners who are released early. We know for a fact that there are enormous numbers of prisoners who reoffend within a year of being released. If these prisoners are released early and then go on very quickly to commit new crimes, there will be a lot of pressure on Keir Starmer. I should just say that Starmer has made it clear that those committed of violent offences and of domestic abuse will not be eligible for early release, and he has also confirmed that the rioters will not be eligible for early release under this new scheme. So whether it will actually do much to deplete the pressure on the prison sector remains to be seen.
Olivia, it seems to be sending some slightly mixed messages in terms of, the level of crime that we've been seeing. And how incentivised people are. We've seen this plan for people to be able to hand in their zombie knives and whatnot without being charged. So, what message is this sending if certain prisoners, of course, will serve their full sentences, but others will be let out 40% of the way through at a time when we've got extremely high crime rates? I think people will be looking at this quite concerned that this could be letting dangerous criminals out onto the street and potentially sending the message to other dangerous criminals that don't worry, you won't spend much time in prison if you break the law.
I think that's a really good question, Emma. I mean, as I say, Keir Starmer has made clear that those in prison for violent offences or domestic abuse won't be eligible for release. But he has also said that all of these rioters will not be eligible for early release. And I think that could possibly, a little bit further down the line, mean that that talk of two-tier policing could start bubbling up again, potentially inciting more tension on the streets of the UK. If it's seen that rioters are getting a harsher sentence than those committed of other offences, and if those committed of other offences are being let out after a very, very short amount of time, then you could see a situation where people start to suggest that policing in this country has become politicised. We're not there yet, and hopefully we won't get there, but we saw the tensions of a couple of weeks ago. We saw what was being said both on social media and, down at the pub in the streets, and it could be that those tensions get reignited when this early release scheme begins.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Olivia Utley, our political correspondent there on College Green, outside the Houses of Parliament. I mean, the concern is if people are potential criminals, if they're going to be put into police cells instead of prison cells, then what happens when the police cells are all clogged up? Can the police still arrest people? Where are they going to go if all the police cells are used up?
Yeah, I understand it's coming from necessity, but if you've got civil unrest, there's always the excuse as we haven't got enough place to put these people if we arrest them.
Mark Fairhurst, the chair of the Prison Officers Association, he says you're now clogging up police cells. so they haven't got the power to arrest people and put them away in a police cell. Massive knock-on effect on the entire criminal justice system. Seems as though there needs to be space everywhere. And if this is a direct consequence of the quick sentencing when it comes to those involved in the violent disorder we've seen, there will be people who argue, well, you're prioritising one type of criminal over another. And is that the best way of
sentencing people for things that they've posted online when you've got violent criminals on the streets, people who are, you know, robbing shops, burgling people's homes, not being arrested because there isn't enough capacity? You're just actually creating a new bottleneck, aren't you?
And it's all well and good Keir Starmer saying, well, if you're a violent criminal, you're not going to be one of the people who's let out early. You're not going to be one of the people who's not put in a police cell.
You might not be arrested in the first place.
You're not going to be one of the people who's not going to be arrested. But to a lot of people, anyone who's, you know, arrested on a criminal charge is potentially a public safety risk, whether it's theft, whether it's burglary, whether it's the, you know, violent assault, whatever it is. Oh, dearie me, let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. But we've got lots more coming up in today's show, including trade unions. They'll be free to strike even if most of their members do not vote for one under a new law. Stay tuned to find out more.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
With record temperatures expected this week, how do zoos keep their cooler creatures cold? Well, at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, the polar bears are enjoying a vegetable ice block.
Polar bears, they do have quite a variety of different temperatures that they naturally do find. Once they're moving off these polar ice caps, they are in the likes of down in the areas of Canada, Hudson Bay. Naturally, they were finding polar bears in 35-degree temperatures year upon year. So they are very much used to warm temperatures and heat waves as such. What you'll tend to find is they'll go for a good swim and then go for a snooze in the shade thereafter.
Not wanting to miss out, the sea lions are treated to a huge fish lolly.
In the hot weather, it's really important to give them ice because these guys, they don't drink salt water. These pools are actually saltwater pools. They actually drink fresh water. They've got 2 freshwater pools in their house, but again, being able to provide that in their outside enclosure is also really important. So offering them ice with their fish is not only enriching, but it's actually beneficial to their welfare as well.
Other animals like the lemurs will be basking in the sun, but also cooling down with frozen sweet potato.
So we've got 3 different species of lemur here. They come in all different shapes, colours, sizes, but they are native to Madagascar. Madagascar can get quite hot, understandably, so throughout the cold months here in Yorkshire, we do give them a nice heated house all year round, but especially making sure it's nice and warm in the winter for them. And it does mean that in the hot spells as well that we're able to keep our eyes on them and try and give them things that make them a bit more comfortable with that incoming hot weather as well.
The frozen food on offer here certainly has the seal of approval on what could be the hottest day of the year.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 27 minutes past 12. Now, the trade unions will be free to strike even if most of their members do not vote for one under a new law.
Yes, well, despite new waves of industrial action, a move to repeal the 2016 Trade Union Act, which sets legal thresholds for how much support strike ballots need, will be tabled.
Meanwhile, it has been revealed that the Labour cabinet ministers have accepted hundreds of thousands of pounds in union donations before reaching the pay deals with the public sector.
OK, well, we're joined by unionist Steve Hadley. Steve, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. What's wrong with these rules on thresholds? Surely you should have a significant proportion of union members in order to then strike and potentially remove a much-needed public service.
Well, if you're going to apply that to trade unions, surely you should apply that to all bodies, like governments, like local councillors, if you want to have a straightforward pass-the-post system. In your democratic system, like the election of government officials that are there for 5 years. Surely then, if you're going to restrict the trade unions with percentages, you should do that with the government. So if I give you an example, if you've got a workplace of 100 people and 49 people vote for a strike and no one votes against it at the minute, then that's an illegal strike, because that's an illegal ballot. That will not be allow industrial action.
But is it not essential, though, for, democracy, essentially, that unions have huge support for strikes, because there will be workers who lose work as a result and money as a result. It can be hugely disruptive, of course, to the staff as well as the rest of the public. So surely there has to be a pretty high threshold.
Well, if strikes are going to be successful, then they have to be massively supported. So the fact is that if we're talking about participation, we could have brought in electronic voting, voting by emails, giving people specific codes like they do in other places where they can register to vote. But the reality is it's never been about participation. And the government knew that a government, by the way, that was elected on less than 40% of the popular vote, the previous Tory government, was aware that if you allowed extra participation, then you would probably these thresholds would easily have been met. So what they did, they demanded it was completely a postal ballot. And, sometimes people don't tell their trade union that they've moved house. People forget to post their ballots, or the ballots get lost in the post. So if this was about participation, then we would have had a system in place that was electronic long before now.
But Steve, what about safe levels of cover? Because we've just seen in the last week that a pensioner died because of the junior doctor walkouts. And that was ruled by a coroner that had an impact on the death of a 70-odd-year-old woman. Doesn't this undermine that safe level of cover in essential services?
Well, the doctors and the nurses have always agreed safe levels of cover before they went out on strike. And I have to say, it's a bit rich coming from a government or a previous government that have seen thousands of disabled people die, old people freeze to death in their houses because they couldn't afford to eat them, because they wouldn't give them enough money to eat and heat at the same time.
But hang on, Steve, we've just seen it.
Junior doctors, the state of the NHS, where you've got over 100,000 vacancies because wages are so bad that people have been leaving in droves, including nurses and doctors. Has completely the fault of the government.
And we also know that strike action. We also know that strike action, unfortunately, has made things only worse in terms of the amount of time, your average person is having to wait for a normal surgery, a normal appointment, a normal life-saving treatment, Steve. But I think there's a concern. There's a concern here. There's a concern here that the Labour government...
Let me answer your point.
No, I haven't finished. I haven't finished. There's a concern that the Labour government has, for example, offered a big wage increase, a very generous multi-year deal to ASLEF, the train driver union. The next day, they're calling another series of strikes. So the worry is that the Labour government just gives in to the trade union bosses, and guess what? They don't stop there. They continue to call for further strikes. They continue to threaten, essentially, public services, and it just continues to spiral. That's what people are worried about here, Steve, that it's the union bosses who are running the show.
OK, so first of all, there's no union bosses. There's elected democratic officials. Second, I'm going to go back
you
and
still
address
run the union, right?
You wanted to brush over, which was the fact that people are dying in the NHS because of the amount of vacancies in the NHS. They're not getting treated in the NHS because of the amount of vacancies in the NHS. And part of that, the vast majority of the reason there is vacancies in the NHS is because people just aren't paid enough. So the strikes in the short term, obviously, were not beneficial to people. That's clear. But in the long term, if it aids recruitment and retention, it will be beneficial to people. Now, about this ASLEF deal, if you do the maths and go back, because these people haven't had a pay rise in 5 years, And what they've had is inflation over those 5 years, topping 30%. If you add inflation, RPI altogether, tops 30%. And they got a pay deal which is worth nearly 15%. So if you do the maths, they've lost 15% in real terms of their earnings.
And yet they're still threatening strike action, and yet they're still threatening. Steve, I'm really sorry. We're going to have to leave it there because we've got to get to the news. I'm very sorry. We'll speak again, but we have to get to the news. I'm sorry about that. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up. But first, let's get to your news headlines.
Oh, feisty.
Very good afternoon to you. A quick look at the top stories this lunchtime. And the body of a man has been brought ashore after a British-flagged super yacht sank off of the coast of Sicily. A tornado is believed to have caused the sailboat to capsize in the early hours of this morning. 15 people have so far been rescued, but 6 are still missing. Divers are now combing the waters as search efforts continue around the wreck, which lies 50 metres deep and half a mile from the coast. In Manchester, a 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a triple stabbing there last night. The 43-year-old woman sadly died at the scene. A 17-year-old girl and 64-year-old man are in a critical condition after suffering serious stab wounds. Police are treating that attack as an isolated incident, but they believe the suspect was known to the victims. Detectives are now appealing for any witnesses or dashcam footage from Barnard Road in the Gorton area. The Tories' Deputy Chairman, Matthew Vickers, has resigned. He stepped back from the role to support Robert Jenrick as the next Conservative leader. He says Jenrick is the standout candidate with a compelling vision for rebuilding the party. The Children's Commissioner says police forces should only strip search a child when it's a life-threatening situation. A report suggests there's a new case every 14 hours in England and Wales, and 1 in 20 of those searches, they say, doesn't follow official procedure. The Prison Governors Association has said it's not sure whether emergency measures to help tackle overcrowding in jails will work. Operation Early Dawn has been triggered in the north of England today as more people are sentenced for their part in riots over recent weeks. The Ukrainian president claims the UK's support for the war effort is slowing down as he appealed for more aid. However, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, maintains there is unwavering support for Ukraine, and that position, he says, has not changed since the incursion into Russia. And parents in England face higher fines from today if their children are taken out of school without permission. Penalties have increased to £80 for every 5 days of absence, which would rise to £160 if unpaid within 3 weeks. Nearly 400,000 fines were issued between 2022 and 23, most of those for unauthorised holidays. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sam Francis, back with you at 1 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And let's take a look at how the markets are standing this hour. The pound will buy you $1.2951 and €1.1736. The price of gold is £1,922.40 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,308 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It's definitely going to be a lot more changeable this week with some heavy rain, some strong winds at times, and that's what we're going to see as we go through the rest of today because there is a system pushing in from the west. It's already brought quite a bit of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and then will push into parts of Scotland, Western England and Wales as we go through the afternoon, bringing cloud and rain here. Further east, a drier, brighter story, in fact, across parts of East Anglia Anglia, perhaps even Kent, clinging on to some sunshine, and with that sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm. Temperatures here getting to highs of around 25 or 26 Celsius. A much fresher story elsewhere, and feeling pretty unpleasant under the rain and with the strong winds towards the north and west. That system, though, is pushing its way eastwards as we go through the end of the day. There may be some drier breaks at times across parts of Scotland through this evening, but it is looking pretty wet, especially across the Dumfries-Galloway area. Here could see some disruption, some localised flooding. The heaviest rain clearing away from Northern Ireland, but staying pretty damp through the evening, whilst that front will be lying across parts of Northern England, Wales and southwest England as we go through the evening, bringing a lot of rain here. A drier story still across parts of the east-southeast for a time, but that rain will eventually push through as we go overnight. Elsewhere, yes, there will be something a bit drier, a bit clearer for some of us, but also some heavy showery bursts, especially across northern parts. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount, especially in the southeast. Here, some places staying around 16 or 17 Celsius. A bit of a cloudy, wet start then in the southeast, but that rain should clear away. Behind it, it is going to be a blustery, showery day for many of us. The strongest winds will be towards the west, and the heaviest showers, perhaps over parts of Scotland, could be the odd rumble of thunder. In between the showers, there will be some sunny spells, but it is going to feel a bit fresher, a bit cooler than today, especially because of those winds. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Southbound on the M6 there's a lane closure whilst a vehicle has a tyre changed from 38 to Kendal at 37. Traffic is coping well, and that's the same for the northbound side of the M6. The lane closure whilst a vehicle has a tyre changed 32 to Lancaster South at 33. Traffic is on the move. Southbound on the M11, an earlier broken down vehicle saw delays from Harlow at 7 through to 6. That's cleared and traffic is on the move. Same for the coastbound side of the M20. All lanes reopened following an earlier broken down vehicle between Leeds Castle and Ashford at junction 9. On the southbound side of the M5, all lanes have cleared. An earlier accident between 11A for Gloucester through to Quedgley at junction 12 saw long delays. That's cleared, all lanes reopened and traffic on the move. So across the UK, that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Right, welcome back. Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12:40. Now, 2/3 of Brits blame the UK's immigration policy for the outbreak of riots across the country.
A new poll by Savanta shows that more people think the recent unrest was about migration rather than the Southport killings.
Yes, voters were split on whether the government's response to the disorder. 49% said it went well, and 43% it went badly in terms of the government's response. I should say that in this polling, there are lots of different options that people could tick in terms of what they blame this all on. But shall we get the expertise of pollster and academic Matt Goodwin, who joins us here in the studio? Thank you, Matt. Let's just ask the basic. What does this survey show us?
Well, it shows us that many people associate the protests and arrests of recent weeks with the government's immigration policy, that many people do view the protests as being directly linked to the policy of mass migration that's defined the country for the last 30 years. And this is one of the arguments I made when the riots first started, which is that many British people, even though people in Westminster don't like to think about this, but they don't feel safe in their own country. The riots and protests were, for many people, for nearly 2/3 in this survey, were about our broken borders, were about the pace of change in the country. So, yes, there was violence, there was criminality, of course there was. Nobody has denied that. But underlying it was not just these sort of concerns over far-right thuggery, as Keir Starmer tried to have us believe, but actually these widespread concerns over migration and its impact on the country.
And this has come in parallel with multiple polls that have shown Keir Starmer's approval ratings among the public looking a little bit like buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
Is this suggestive of, and not that they necessarily will act on this, but the necessity of the Labour government to actually recognise the grievances and the reasons why there may have been this civil unrest, that this isn't necessarily, just... Surely maybe there is a kind of, far-right hooligan element to this, but there's actually a much broader context that explains this unrest, and that actually the Labour government are going to have to grapple with that at some point.
Yeah. Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, I wrote this morning on my Substack that immigration is now the #1 issue in the country. So it's above the economy, it's above the NHS, it's above crime. That's a remarkable thing, given that we're in a very severe cost of living crisis. The NHS is collapsing and crime is visibly been bearing down on people. For the Brits to say, actually, no, immigration is my top concern, it gives you a sense of where the public mood is. And the other thing I would say is this weekend we got some other evidence from pollsters like Opinium too, which not only show that Keir Starmer's leadership ratings have collapsed since the election last month, and they really have. I mean, his net leadership rating is down 26 points with that pollster. But they also asked Brits, well, what do you think about immigration today? 66% said immigration is too high. And then they were asked, well, what do you think about how immigration has impacted the economy, has impacted public services, and has impacted our cultural life? And a larger number of Brits said it's impacted those things negatively than the number who said it's impacted those things positively. So what I would argue is the Brits are becoming more concerned about immigration. They're becoming more sceptical about immigration at exactly the same time as Labour are now pushing the pedal down on mass immigration.
May I just make the point that people were asked in this survey a number of different questions about, essentially, to what extent do you think that each of the following is or is not responsible for the unrest we've seen? Lots of people, 75% saying far-right organisations are responsible, 73% saying social media companies are, 64% saying the UK's immigration policy. So, yes, a large chunk saying that was to blame. It goes on, previous Conservative government, 53, traditional news organisations, 51, football supporters, 33.
Emily, can I just...
it's quite a range of different issues that people think are at the bottom of this.
But can I just press back on one thing here, which is, in a lot of these surveys about the riots, we have had people saying, oh, it's about the far right, or it's about, you know, I don't know, figures like Tommy Robinson or politicians, you know, like Nigel Farage, who I would not consider to be far right, by the way. Well, why are those figures in British politics? Those figures are in British politics because of these widespread concerns over broken borders, mass migration and segregation in communities. So I just don't think what we might call the mainstream conversation about these disturbances has been accurate. I think, as I have kept saying since these riots erupted, the blunt reality is many people no longer feel safe in Britain, and that is why they reacted.
And it's quite possible to say to have ticked both the far-right organisation box and also the immigration policy box as well.
Yeah.
Because with these things, there are always multifactorial.
Matt, in previous polls, time and time again, same at the ballot box, people have voted for less migration and they've only got more. So in this latest poll, what has changed? Are people, on average, more concerned about migration, even more than they were previously?
Yeah.
And if so, why is that?
Yeah, so the first thing to say is, yes, people are much more concerned about immigration than they used to be. That's why it's the #1 issue in the country today. The second thing to say is if you look at, for example, long-term, what we call trackers of public opinion, regular surveys that have been asked by people like YouGov, what they show over time is that the number of people who think immigration has been too high is now at a record high. The number who think it's about right has been falling. The number who think it's having a negative impact on the country has been rising. The number who think it's having a positive impact has been falling. So if we just take a step back and look at the longer-term trends, basically what I think has happened is, you know, from 2010 onwards and through that Brexit referendum, and in 2017, 2019, we've had politician after politician after politician saying we will lower the overall numbers and take back control of the borders, only to do the very opposite of those things, to basically put mass migration on steroids. And this includes Starmer's government. I argued this morning, I think his ratings are collapsing, partly because he said to the Brits, look, I will smash the gangs. Well, already we have record numbers of illegal migrants coming into the country on the small boats. We've now got, I think, over 131,000 people in total since 2018. Starmer's also liberalising legal migration. He's increasing migration from Afghanistan. He's getting rid of the salary thresholds. He's making it easier for relatives of migrants to come in. He's doing the opposite, basically, of what he said.
But what would you say to those who would argue that the reason why immigration is top of concerns at the moment is because on social media people can spread, you know, the worst of the community tensions.
Oh, yes.
People can share information that relates to the worst examples, or, you know, you get feeds of illegal migrants coming over the channel, and it's all to do with social media pushing this type of content into your algorithm. So that's an argument you hear a lot.
Absolutely. So what I would argue is the elite conversation in the country would say this is all about misinformation, much like they said the vote for Brexit and the vote for Trump was about misinformation. In other words, people are too stupid to know what's going on in the country. They're being misled by social media. They're being led by Elon Musk. They're being led by politicians.
And therefore, we don't have to listen to them.
Yeah, I would push back and say, actually, people are not idiots. They're not lemmings. They're not being pushed around. They can see what is happening to the country they love. They can see that they are now at risk of losing their identity, their culture and values because of policies that have been taken by both the left and the right, which they never voted for. So let me be clear. The Brits never voted for what I would consider to be an extreme policy of mass immigration. Politicians are saying voters are extremists because they're protesting. I think many people feel the Labour government is being pretty extreme in pushing the pedal down on a policy that many people oppose.
Well, what is very clear is that the government won't be able to ignore it for very long.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much indeed. Matt Goodwin, author, pollster and academic. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We're going to take a very short break, but stay with us.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry also revealed that he wouldn't bring his wife Meghan Markle back to the UK over safety concerns.
Let's talk to royal correspondent Michael Cole.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Ellie. I mean, they live in California. I'm not sure what the murder rate is there, but that's a more dangerous place than Britain's at any time of the day. And of course, he compromised his own safety when he said in his book, Spare, his autobiography, which was Ghost Britain, that he'd personally killed 25 Taliban when he was serving with the British Army in Afghanistan. Well, that painted a target for life on the back of himself and his family, which was a very unwise thing for him to do. The other thing which struck me, it was that he invoked the name the late Queen, saying that he'd had several conversations with his grandmother, and she'd been very, very supportive in his battle. He sees himself, and it's the word he's used, as a dragon slayer against the popular press, the tabloid press, and he's continuing with that. Of course, his brother, Prince William, has settled, but also in the programme was Hugh Grant. Now, Hugh Grant also has settled, as indeed did I. When I received an apology from News Group. I believe in a free and unfettered press. Newspapers are having a bad time at the moment, losing circulation, losing advertising. Young people don't read newspapers. And so I felt that the right thing to do was to settle. I didn't want to take punitive action against newspapers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes, she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done. Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, 12:52 is the time, and King Charles has axed Prince Andrew's security team, which he was privately funding.
This means that Andrew will need to find the money to fund his own £1 million security team if he wants to stay at the Royal Lodge. We're joined now by GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Poor Prince Andrew.
Yeah, well,
to fund his own security.
What a dilemma. Yes, so his security is being axed as of November, according to The Sun on Sunday. And the big issue for that is that his 30-bedroom mansion Royal Lodge at the moment is separately guarded by this privately funded security team that Prince King Charles even, is paying for, because Prince Andrew, if you remember, lost the police protection, our taxpayer-funded police protection in 2022 when he was forced to step back as a working member of the royal family. He cannot stay in that property if it is not guarded, because clearly he is still a member of the royal family, even if he is not working. So the solution, and the cost-effective solution, according to the Crown Estate and by extension King Charles, is to move Prince Andrew from the massive royal lodge to the smaller property of Frogmore Cottage, which is in the guarded Windsor Castle perimeter, which already has police protection anyway, because that guards the King when he's in residence there, and the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children, because Adelaide Cottage is also within that perimeter. So it's kind of a win-win in terms of cost-effective security measures, but Prince Andrew, on the other hand, don't think will be too happy moving out of his home, which he does have a lease on.
Frogmore Cottage, of course, famously too small for Harry and Meghan, which brings us on to Harry and Meghan. So what's the latest? Their Columbia tour is over?
Yes, it is over. It was a 4-day tour, and usually I'd be giving you the highlights and the lowlights of what went on, and then you could probably make up your mind whether it was a success or not. Really struggling to do that, to be honest. The reason being is there was very little independence in terms of independent coverage. So there was one, what we call a pool reporter, who of course was kind of on every single engagement. So we got that copy. We got their own glossy images and photographs and videos, but in terms of independent journalists, not many there.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Cameron Walker, GB News royal correspondent. We'll speak to you a little bit later, I'm sure. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're going to have a little look at the weather and then be straight back with you.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News. Lots of wet and windy weather to come as we go through this week, and we have already seen things turning pretty unsettled for some of us already today. There is a system coming in from the west already bringing quite a bit of rain across parts of Northern Ireland into Scotland, and we're going to see more rain affecting parts of Northern England, Wales and the southwest as we go through this evening. That rain then continuing its way southeastwards, so although it's largely fine through much of today in the southeast, it is going to turn wet as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. There will be some clear skies following, but also plenty of showers around, and as a result, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, many places holding up in mid-teens Celsius. First thing tomorrow morning, that system is still going to be across parts of the southeast, so quite a cloudy start here, some outbreaks of rain as well, but it will clear away. Elsewhere, yes, there will be some sunny breaks around, but also quite a few showers, particularly across parts of Wales and southwest England, also some showers for northern England too. Plenty of showers for Northern Ireland and down the western side of Scotland. Further east, it's likely to be a bit of a dry, brighter start here, albeit for Shetland there could be some persistent rain around. Through the day, really, once we say goodbye to that system in the southeast, we are going to have lots of showers for many places, and yes, some sunny spells in between the showers, but do watch out for some strong blustery winds, especially towards western coasts. This is where we have the risk of seeing some coastal gales, and all the time those strong winds are going to make it feel a little bit fresher than it has done of late. Quite an autumnal feel to things at the moment, with temperatures only just about getting into the high teens or low 20s for many of us. More showers to come, particularly across northern and western parts as we go through tomorrow evening towards the southeast, a greater chance of having a fine end to the day. There is likely to be some very wet weather arriving as we go through Wednesday into Thursday, particularly across northern and western parts of the UK, so do stay up to date. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours, but time is ticking. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
Have we reached a tipping point in the gender wars? So 6 years ago, comedy writer Graham Linehan, the man who created hit sitcoms such as Father Ted and Black Books, was cancelled for standing up for the rights of women. But have things actually got any better? Well, I'm delighted to say that Graham Linehan joins me now. Just in case anyone's watching who doesn't know what happened to you, what happened?
Well, I just noticed women being bullied online and in you know, physical space as well, and I started objecting to it. I immediately started losing work.
And this was just on Twitter or social media?
Yeah.
Just making that point?
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, I had what I thought was a bit of a kind of safety net in the Father Ted musical, which I saw as my pension.
Yes.
And finally that was taken away too by my spineless colleagues, I'm afraid.
I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? Because, you know, Father Ted, one of the most famous sitcoms of all time, the musical, a surefire hit.
Yep.
Still hasn't been produced.
Yeah.
Still being held hostage by Hat-Trick Productions, who are the people who have the rights, yeah?
Yeah. It's because it's a combination of things. It's because they're terrified of activists. They have activists within the company, and they don't have enough interest in the women in their lives to investigate the issue.
Are they just afraid that it might happen to them as well?
I don't know. I think it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of fear. I genuinely don't think they have enough curiosity or empathy with women to actually look into the issue. They seem to think that women's rights, as people like Alistair Campbell often say, are a culture war issue. And, you know, we've seen it reach its apex, really, in that this week, and for 10 days, I think it is, we've seen men hitting women, punching women in the boxing ring.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, the 19th of August. I'm Emma Webb.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Now, super yacht disaster. 1 dead and 6 missing after a yacht carrying mostly British passengers is caught in a tornado and capsized off of the coast of Italy. We'll bring you the latest.
And Operation Early Dawn, an emergency plan to avoid overcrowding in our jails, has been triggered this morning. The government has just announced in the wake of the speedy sentencing of those involved in the recent violent disorder.
Is misogyny a hate crime? Extreme misogyny will be treated as a form of extremism under new government plans, as Yvette Cooper orders a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to tackle threats posed by harmful ideologies.
Now, should misogyny be treated as extremism by our government? What do you think?
No.
Why not?
No, it shouldn't.
Why not? Is misogyny not good?
So the PREVENT strategy is supposed to stop people from being drawn into terrorism. Now, misogyny might be something that sometimes goes in hand with terrorist ideologies. The Islamists are very misogynistic. But I don't think that misogyny itself belongs in the PREVENT strategy. I think that's a misuse of that programme.
So, for example, if you had a classroom, and this is something that teachers have been talking quite a bit about. If you were in a classroom and there was a boy who kept repeatedly saying things that were deemed misogynistic, he shouldn't then be, you know, sent off to the PREVENT scheme.
No, I don't think so. I mean, especially with kids, you know, yes, it's bad. There are lots of things that are bad, but you don't lump them all into the category of terrorism. I think that's insane. I also think it's a really slippery slope when it comes to free speech, because these things will be seen as being a kind of conveyor belt towards committing acts of violence. And I just think that given the climate of free speech already and the way the government is being so heavy-handed on it, that this is a pretty toxic suggestion.
I just wonder, I think a lot of women are rightly concerned about the low conviction rate when it comes to violent and sexual assault. So why doesn't the government not focus, and I'm sure they'd say they are, but why not just focus on, you know, enforcing the legislation as it stands, making sure that if you rape a woman, that you are then convicted and sent to prison?
I think exactly. Nice. I mean, it's people have said, oh, you know, you're saying that it's insane that misogyny should be understood as terrorism. You mustn't care about women's safety. Anybody who knows what I say knows that I am concerned about women's safety. I just don't think the solution is to call misogyny terrorism. Rather, I think that the solution is to actually prosecute people who do actually, you know, rape and murder women. It's not.
Yeah,
you know,
it's probably easier just to focus on, you know, what someone's saying in a classroom or what someone's posted online.
I think that's what it is. It's because it's easier.
Well, maybe. gbnews.com/yoursay. Please do get in touch. Should misogyny be treated as an extremist ideology? But first, it's your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom just after 1 o'clock. And the top story this lunchtime, an investigation in Italy has now opened into the sinking of a super yacht off of the coast of Sicily, which has left at least one person dead, while 6 others remain missing. 15 of the 22 people on board, including a 1-year-old baby and its mother, were rescued. But it's feared at this stage that those missing may have been trapped inside their cabins on board that vessel. Divers are now combing the waters as search efforts continue around the wreck. A warning, if you're watching these pictures here, it does contain distressing footage of that one body being recovered earlier. The ship now lies 50 metres deep and half a mile off the coast. And as we look at these pictures from that scene of the recovery, let's take a moment to hear from meteorologist Jim Dale, who told us earlier the weather conditions in the area were treacherous.
It was a danger zone, so I don't know what the situation was on this particular yacht, whether they had a meteorologist on board or anybody who was trained. But sometimes these things do occur, particularly this type of event. A water spout is quite unusual, so if it hit directly, then it would have been a little bit of a, let's just say, a catastrophic impact, and obviously has been.
Well, turning to news in Manchester, a 43-year-old woman has died. 2 others are in a critical condition following a triple stabbing there. A 22-year-old man, believed to be known to those victims, has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Greater Manchester Police are now appealing for any witnesses as they continue their investigation into what they say they believe is an isolated incident. Meanwhile, people handing in zombie knives and machetes to police stations ahead of a new ban won't be punished. The restrictions come in next month, and though the government has stopped short of making ninja swords illegal, it insists that will happen soon. Policing Minister Dame Deanna Johnson says the public should do the right thing and surrender any dangerous weapons, arguing that there is no legitimate need to have them. Prisons Minister Lord Timpson claims he's inherited a justice system in crisis as plans to address overcrowding in jails have been activated in northern England. Operation Early Dawn will see defendants who were remanded in custody waiting for a court appearance now held in police cells for longer. It's separate, though, to the early release scheme for some offenders, which kicks in next month. More than half of people think Britain is heading in the wrong direction as an opinion poll suggests a drop in support for the new Labour government. An equal percentage of adults have a favourable or unfavourable view of Sir Keir Starmer, with 38% of those surveyed falling on both sides of that question. Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives' ratings, meanwhile, haven't changed since the election. The Tories' Deputy Chairman, Matthew Vickers, has resigned this lunchtime. He stepped back from the role to support Robert Jenrick as the next Conservative leader. He says Jenrick is the standout candidate with a compelling vision for rebuilding the party. The Prime Minister insists support for Ukraine is unwavering after Volodymyr Zelensky suggested the UK's backing for aid is slowing down. It comes after Ukrainian forces destroyed a second bridge in the Kursk region as forces continue their incursion into Russian territory. It's thought the move aimed at creating a buffer between those two countries is not working. The Democratic National Convention kicks off in Chicago later today, where Kamala Harris will be officially announced as the party's nominee for the US presidential election. Last month, Donald Trump was confirmed as the Republicans' pick, just a few days after he survived an assassination attempt. Americans will head to the polls in November. Our correspondent in the US, Steve Edgington, says the DNC will be a critical test for the party.
This is unprecedented. There has been Democratic primaries for votes for their candidacy for the last, few decades. And this time around, Kamala Harris has not won any Democratic primaries. She's been installed as the candidate by essentially President Biden and Barack Obama. So this is a real key test for the Democrats. She's almost certainly going to get the candidacy. And she's also chosen her vice president nominee, Tim Walz.
A 20-year-old man has been charged with murder and of a sexual offence of a dead body. Police found a woman who'd been stabbed at a home in Dartford in Kent early on Saturday morning. Anestas Juska from the same town is due in court today. Well, parents in England are facing higher fines from today if their children are taken out of school without permission. Penalties have increased to £80 now for every 5 days of absence, which will rise to £160 if unpaid within 3 weeks. Nearly 400,000 fines were issued between 2022 and 2023, most of those fines for unauthorised holidays. In Worcester, a 55-year-old woman's been accused of being part of a global monkey torture network that paid people overseas to kill baby monkeys online. Adriana Orm is charged with posting 26 videos and 1 image of the animals being tortured, sending them to a chat group. A 37-year-old woman's already pleaded guilty early this year after an investigation into animal torture. Well, it's understood Ted Baker is closing its remaining 31 stores in the UK this week, putting more than 500 jobs at risk. There's been uncertainty around a potential rescue deal with Frasers Group. Finally, the remnants of Hurricane Ernesto are set to batter parts of the UK this week. They're bringing winds of up to 60 miles an hour. A yellow weather warning for rain's been issued for Scotland. That covers the southwest of the country from this afternoon, and the northwest too for most of Wednesday and into Thursday. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you at 1:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 minutes past 1. I've got my tongue in a twist there. Now, search and rescue efforts are underway after a British super yacht was hit by a tornado and sank off the coast of Sicily.
Yes, 1 person is now known to have died. 6 people remain missing after the 50-metre sailing boat with 22 people on board capsized in the early hours of this morning. Well, GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White joins us now. Mark, are there any updates on this horrific incident?
No, that operation is still underway and it's still described by Italian search and rescue teams as a search and rescue operation. Sadly, they have reported, the dive teams that are some 50 metres down on the seabed where this yacht is now located, that they have seen bodies inside the yacht. They've managed to see them through the portholes, apparently, of the yacht. And we know that the body of a man has also been recovered by the dive teams. But the hope is always that there could be pockets of air inside this large yacht, 180 foot long. There could be pockets of air in which some people might have been able to survive in. So until there is no hope, then they will continue with this operation. We've been hearing from the captain of another vessel that was moored just in the bay alongside this vessel, Bayesian. Now, that captain, Karsten Borner, told us that the weather just closed in very suddenly indeed, and they had to take evasive steps to ensure that they weren't capsized. This is how he describes the events that unfolded.
This morning we got this very strong orkan gust. Yeah. And we had to start the engine to keep the ship in an anchor position, and we watched the ship behind us not to touch them. Yeah. And we managed to keep the ship in position, and after the storm was over, we noticed that the ship behind us was gone. We saw a red flare. Yeah. So my first mate and I went to to the position, and we found this life raft.
Yeah.
Drifting.
But anything inside?
With 15 people inside.
15 people
15
inside.
people inside. 4 people injured, 3 heavy injured.
Yeah.
And we brought them to our ship. And then we communicated with the Coast Guard, and after some time the Coast Guard came, and later they picked injured people, and when we 1-2 hours later they picked up the other people.
So that worrying as well, the indication that 3 of those survivors, according to the captain there, have been seriously injured. No update yet from Italian search and rescue services on that. We have been hearing from a woman who was one of the passengers on board this yacht. She's been named in the Italian press as Charlotte. She was the mother of the 1-year-old child, a little girl who apparently is called Sophie. She was telling reporters that they were all thrown into the water, that she desperately tried to keep her young baby Sophie above the water, full arms stretched to hold her out of the water. She was screaming, she said, but all she could hear were the screams of other people in the water.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, for bringing us the latest. We're now going to be joined by the Italian journalist, Angela Corias. Angela, from the reports we're hearing, this sounds like the most horrific freak incident, something that no one really was expecting.
No, apparently not. They have been given the forecast as quite risky because it's the last couple of days have been very windy in Italy, but probably right in that moment there was no alert. Apparently they had been in a party at night, both boats, because there were 2 boats, and they were moored. It seems like they were caught by a tornado, like all of a sudden, so they didn't expect it. In fact, for now, we don't have the official statements from the investigators of the police. But, we have seen some eyewitnesses. They have said that they were seeing the ship, the boat, and then at some point they just didn't see. They saw the big light of the alarm, and then the boat disappeared. So they called the rescue team. Now it's been like the Capitaneria di Porto, the Navy, is conducting all the research. But the other boat also started to help them, and then immediately they arrived, but there are still these passengers missing. What I have read, most recent news, is the deep divers of the firemen. They are down now, like 49 meters under the water, and it seems that the passengers that are missing, they were probably inside their cabins, and they remain there trapped. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrendous, and I hope that the rescue team there will be able to recover as many people as possible. Thank you very much indeed, Angela Corias, Italian journalist. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Now, our reporter Adam Cherry has just been at number 10 for the journalists' lobby. He joins us now. Adam, what's the latest?
Yeah, afternoon, guys. So lots to get through. Let's just get into it. So, as you heard during the bulletins, first of all, on Ukraine, Prime Minister saying he remains resolute in support of Ukraine. This is despite claims, or despite reports that the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said that the support from Britain is, quote, slowing down. There's no change on the Storm Shadow missile policy. These British-made missiles are not being used. They don't have the permission to use those in the Kursk offensive into Russia. There's some suggestion over the weekend that this is actually as a result of pressure from Washington. Now, when the spokesman was asked about this today, they said they weren't going to get drawn into that. So I think we can understand that perhaps that is what's really going on, but for the sake of diplomacy, they're not saying so at the moment. On Operation Early Dawn, which involves keeping defendants in prisons, in police cells, whilst they wait for prison space to be freed up and they have their court appearance, they say that the process is under constant review and public safety is paramount, and anyone who's a danger to the public won't be released on bail. They don't have any expectations on numbers at this point, although they pointed to the last time this was triggered, which was in May 2023 under the last government, and they said it lasted for around 7 or 8 days, and it was a localised approach. So we can expect that there'll be a similar outcome here, although they're not necessarily confirming it. On the cash for jobs scandal, which has been brewing over the last couple of days, Emily Middleton, who is a newly appointed senior civil servant, her firm donated £67,000 to the Labour Party in the lead up to the last general election. The Prime Minister is confident that all appointments were made on merit, although they weren't being drawn on whether the PM himself actually signed off on that appointment to her position as Director General in the Department for Science and Technology. But there's an independent process, Downing Street says, and everything is above board, and he's confident that all such appointments have followed the correct process. On the strikes, the rail strikes and the pay deals, of course we saw the ASLEF deal over the last week with rail workers getting a significant pay rise. They say the strikes were costly and it was costing £850 million to the taxpayer, these ongoing strikes, so the deal is actually saving money over the next 3 years. However, of course, we are now seeing new strikes from the LNER train drivers. So they're disappointed for passengers, but there will be no arms race between unions. They say this deal these processes are appropriate and the money given is the right call.
Quite a lot to get through there. Good questions were asked of the spokesperson there. Thank you very much indeed, Adam Cherry. It'll be interesting to see if this Labour cronyism story continues to gather
the same traction as the Tory sleaze did. I'm sure it will.
Always did.
We'll see.
But coming up after the break, we're going to be discussing whether misogyny should be treated as an extremist ideology. Stay with us.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
John Steinbeck once said of his 1939 novel, The Grapes of Wrath, that he intended to rip a reader's nerves to rags. Well, GB News sent its famously delicate Stefan Kyriazis to see an adaptation of the work in a London theatre, and somehow he's made it into the studio today. Give people a tiny background about The Grapes of Wrath. I mean, it's about the Depression, isn't it?
Yes, it's the Great Plains, which were absolutely ravaged by droughts. They'd completely overfarmed the topsoil, so they had all these huge dust storms, and basically the farms were worthless. So they reckon in the 1930s, about 3.5 million people left this huge central agrarian area of America, and this is a very poor, white working region. Often, many of them headed for the coast to California to this dream of orange groves, white houses, plentiful work. And we focus in on the Joad family, very poor, very working class. Tom Joad has just got out of prison for homicide in self-defence, and he's played by one of the Treadaways, Luke Treadaway, who I confused with his twin Harry.
Understandably.
They are identical. And so they pack everything into this kind of old-fashioned jalopy. It's a bit like Beverly Hillbillies, but not humorous. And I think there's about 13 people crammed, hanging off the sides, and they embark on this odyssey across the country. So there's all these huge themes about migration, about prejudice. They are viewed as an underclass by other Americans. So although they're migrants, they're not quite immigrants, but they're treated very poorly, as almost subhuman. When they get there, the dream turns out to be false, the pay is terrible, and then very often when they take the job the next day, the pay is halved. It's a terrible life.
It's a very angry novel.
It's an angry, dark novel.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 22 minutes past 1. Now, extreme misogyny will be treated as terrorism for the first time under new government plans to combat the radicalisation of young men online.
Yes, so Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has ordered a review of Britain's counter-extremism strategy with the aim of tackling violence against women and girls in the same way as, say, Islamist and far-right extremism. Well, Christine Cunniff is the head teacher of co-ed school LVS Ascot, and she joins us now. Now, we're talking to you about this, Christine, because there's been concerns for a while, and it's been spoken about by teachers and pupils alike, that there's a rise in misogyny being seen in schools, that a lot of young boys are being influenced by the likes of Andrew Tate to take on misogynistic views. They may be abusing female teachers or their other female pupils in their class, for example. Just how widespread is this?
I do believe that it's a growing problem and it is widespread. And unfortunately, it's amongst the very young, I'd say probably early teenage years, if not before, which is really worrying because obviously any opinions that they form now will stay with you through life. And I think it's up to us as educators to ensure that we try and tackle this problem and educate young people how to behave and how to be kind to each other.
Now, Christine, schools have a statutory duty under the PREVENT programme to prevent individuals from being drawn into terrorism. Some would say that this is an inappropriate use of PREVENT to define misogyny as a form of extremism in itself and therefore to associate it with terrorism. Could this be not the sort of best way of tackling those problems in schools?
It's not the best way of tackling it. We have to make sure that the community is safe for everybody, and we have to protect young women and girls and ladies as well. So I think there does need to be a way of reporting it. I think there needs to be a way of monitoring it, and I think there needs to be far more education about it and more. It's maybe some more. I don't want to say punitive, because I think, young men are struggling in this society to grow up. I've got sons myself. I know the struggles they have, and we've got to learn to live together. And there's got to be better ways of tackling this than putting them together with extremists, which I think is really, really wrong.
Interesting. I mean, how does this manifest itself in the classroom? So I guess there's a huge difference between a boy saying, oh, she's a bit of all right, to a girl in the class or something like that, or saying something that could be seen as threatening sexual assault, or saying something very rude and misogynistic about a female teacher, for example. I mean, this is a spectrum, isn't it?
Oh, a wide spectrum. And, you've only got to go back a couple of decades, and we know the way things have changed, especially for women, and how we're treated as well. And things have moved on drastically. And there is a difference between... And there's no room for what I would call banter on this, because some people will find it offensive. But there is a broad spectrum. Now, if any of my young men decided to be derogatory towards a female teacher in my school, they'll be finding another school to go to.
But isn't this really just about manners? This is about, teaching children through the culture of the school and the way that young boys and girls interact with each other, teaching them how to treat each other regardless of whether they're a boy or a girl, with good manners, rather than this being something for the law to lump in young men who are already finding things quite difficult and feel, I hate to use the term, marginalised by society, to lump them in with extremists when misogyny may already be part of terrorist ideology. Islamists are pretty misogynistic. But is this going to actually make the problem worse?
I think it will make the problem worse. And I think we have to try and understand the challenges that young people go through. It's not just young men. There's all sectors of society are going through challenges at the moment, which is well documented at the moment right across our country. And it does boil down to respect. It does boil down to how we treat each other. And at the end of the day, being kind to each other. There's no place for any kind of nastiness, bullying, whatsoever. And it has to be tackled in that way. And we try our best as teachers to inform young people how to act with each other. And we need a government and we need policy that's effective to help and support us rather than make the problem worse.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate your experience on this one. Christine Cunniff, head teacher of the co-ed school, LVS Ascot. I mean, some would say, you know, just to have separate schools for separate genders, but then does that really help in the future?
You went to an all-girls school.
I did go to an all-girls school.
Did it protect you from misogyny?
Well, probably, yeah, probably. if it was going to be, yes.
Well, I personally
Although I
had a
wish
great
that there were
time
boys at my school, obviously. When you're a teenager, you want to have boys at your school, not just be stuck in an all-girls place. But, I mean, if there are young boys who are watching, you know, the most hideous pornographic material, they're listening to people like Andrew Tate who push the idea that your problems are because women have so much in our society now and the only reason you're not doing well is because a woman's doing well. Like, there is a lot of that propaganda being pushed at young men, but then you don't want to marginalise them.
You mentioned pornography, but it's a sticking plaster, isn't it? I think we've eroded the manners between boys and girls, and this is sort of where you end up, I guess.
Yeah, and perhaps poor parenting as well.
Typical me to shill for traditional values, but anyway.
Yeah, well, in other news, emergency measures to ease prison overcrowding have been activated by the Ministry of Justice after hundreds of rioters were charged for their role in the recent unrest.
This means defendants waiting across the north of England for a court appearance will be kept in police cells until prison space becomes available.
Well, joining us now is our political correspondent, Olivia Rutley. Olivia, there's quite a bit of concern that, OK, you fill up the police cells, but then what happens if you make an arrest? Where do those potential criminals then stay? I mean, this is quite dangerous, is it not?
Well, absolutely. There are a lot of questions surrounding this emergency measure. The truth is that the prison sector is just living hand to mouth at the moment. It likes to operate with about 1,400 spare places. At the moment, in male prisons, there are about 300 spare places across the whole of the UK. And prison leaders say that with any fewer than 300, they will be simply unable to operate at all. So this is an emergency measure. No one thinks it's going to be particularly sort of brilliant in the long run, but the government feels it's the only thing they can do to alleviate the immediate pressure of massive overcrowding. Another new report out today showed that in Durham, in one prison in Durham, one of the areas where overcrowding is at its worst, 86% of male prisoners are living in overcrowded conditions, with most of the cells, which are designed for one, now housing 2 people. That situation isn't sustainable. So this Operation Early Dawn has kicked into effect today. This isn't a Labour prerogative. This is something which the Conservative government did back in May last year. It's a long-term action which is triggered whenever overcrowding gets serious. The government is hoping that it alleviates the very, very immediate pressure. But as you say, Emily, all that they're doing in the long run is creating a bit of a bottleneck. If the police cells then get full, what happens when arrests are being made? And of course, arrests are being made all the time. About 1,000 people have now been arrested for rioting, with 500 of those already charged. We're expecting more of those to be charged in the coming days and weeks. This is a problem which is just growing and growing for Keir Starmer. The other way that this Labour government is hoping to alleviate the crisis is in 3 weeks' time, on the 10th of September, they're bringing in a new policy which would mean that the standard length of time, the sort of status quo for prisoners to spend in prison, would be 40% of their sentences rather than 50%. So essentially, unless prisoners are violent or being convicted for domestic abuse, they will be released earlier, 20% earlier from their sentence. There is a lot of worry about that as well. What will happen? We know already that reoffending rates are very, very high in the year or so after people come out of prison. Will there just be more potentially dangerous offenders on the street? Starmer has made clear that those convicted violent offences won't be eligible manageable, but how long will that policy stick for? With the overcrowding at such a peak at the moment, the Labour government is desperately looking for anything that will ease that pressure, and there aren't very many levers to pull.
No, well, thank you very much indeed, Olivia Ratley, our political correspondent there on College Green in Westminster. We've got lots more coming up on today's show.
We sure do. Should flags be banned from the proms? But first, it's the news with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It is exactly 32 minutes past 1, and the top story this lunchtime: the body of a man has been brought ashore after a British-flagged super yacht sank off the coast of Sicily this morning. A tornado is understood to have caused the sailboat to capsize near Palermo in the early hours of this morning. 15 people have been rescued so far, though 6 are still missing. The latest lines we're getting are that a captain of a ship who helped to rescue people on board has said that the owner of the sunken ship and a child are believed to be among those missing. Divers are now continuing their search of the waters around the wreckage, which lies 50 metres deep and half a mile off of the coast. Here, a triple stabbing in Manchester has left 1 woman dead and 2 other people in a critical condition, including a teenager. A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after that attack in the Gorton area last night. Police say they're treating it as an isolated incident, but believe the suspect was known to the victims. They're also appealing for witnesses or possible dashcam footage. Meanwhile, people handing zombie knives and machetes to police stations ahead of a new ban won't be punished. Restrictions come in next month. The government, though, stopped short of making ninja swords illegal, but insists that will happen soon. Policing Minister Dame Diana Johnson says the public should do the right thing and surrender any dangerous weapons. She argues there's no legitimate need to have them. The Tories' deputy chairman, Matthew Vickers, has resigned today. He stepped back from that role to support Robert Jenrick as the next Conservative leader. He says Jenrick is the standout candidate with a compelling vision for rebuilding the party. The Children's Commissioner says police forces should only strip search a child when it's a life-threatening situation. A report suggests there's a new case every 14 hours in England and Wales, and only 1 in 20 of those searches don't follow official procedure. Defendants waiting for a court date in Northern Ireland will be held in police cells until a prison space becomes available as part of new plans to ease overcrowding. Separate measures next month will see some offenders released after serving 40% of their sentences. However, the Prison Governors Association says it's not sure whether the emergency measures will make a difference. And the Ukrainian president claims the UK's support for the war effort is slowing down as he appealed for more aid. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, maintains there's unwavering support for Ukraine, and that position, he says, has not changed since the incursion into Russia. And finally, the last of the Ted Baker stores in the UK will close by the end of tomorrow. The website's also been pulled after the fashion chain collapsed, putting more than 500 jobs at risk. Its future was already in doubt when the firm running its UK operations fell into administration in March. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you for your next update at 2 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2956 and €1.1731. The price of gold, £1,925.56 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 this hour is at 8,315 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It's definitely going to be a lot more changeable this week with some heavy rain, some strong winds at times, and that's what we're going to see as we go through the rest of today because there is a system pushing in from the west. It's already brought quite a bit of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and then will push into parts of Scotland, Western England and Wales as we go through the afternoon, bringing cloud and rain here. Further east, a drier, brighter story, in fact, across parts of East Anglia, perhaps even Kent, clinging on to some sunshine, and with that sunshine feeling pleasantly warm. Temperatures here getting to highs of around 25 or 26 Celsius. A much fresher story elsewhere and feeling pretty unpleasant under the rain and with the strong winds towards the north and west. That system, though, is pushing its way eastwards as we go through the end of the day. There may be some drier breaks at times across parts of Scotland through this evening, but it is looking pretty wet, especially across the Dumfries-Galloway area. Here could see some disruption, some localised flooding. The heaviest rain clearing away from Northern Ireland, but staying pretty damp through the evening, whilst that front will be lying across parts of Northern England, Wales and southwest England as we go through the evening, bringing a lot of rain here. A drier story still across parts of the east-southeast for a time, but that rain will eventually push through as we go overnight. Elsewhere, yes, there will be something a bit drier, a bit clearer for some of us, but also some heavy showery bursts, especially across northern parts. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount, especially in the southeast. Here, some places staying around 16 or 17 Celsius. A bit of a cloudy, wet start then in the southeast, but that rain should clear away. Behind it, it is going to be a blustery, showery day for many of us. The strongest winds will be towards the west, and the heaviest showers, perhaps over parts of Scotland, could be the odd rumble of thunder. In between the showers, there will be some sunny spells, but it is going to feel a bit fresher, a bit cooler than today, especially because of those winds. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M8 eastbound in Edinburgh at junction 1, Hermiston Gate. We've got slow traffic on the M61 northbound in Lancashire at the intersection with the M6 at junction 30. The usual slow traffic for the M5 northbound in the West Midlands to join the M6 at junction 8. Queues on the M1 northbound in Bedfordshire. There's a lane closed on the exit slip road for a broken down vehicle at junction 10, the Luton Airport Spur Road. Severe delays in Berkshire on the A34 northbound. It's been closed for recovery work after a combine harvester has fallen off a tractor. Diversions are signposted. We're also seeing slow traffic on the southbound stretch of the A34 due to onlookers, and slow traffic in the roadworks on the M25 anti-clockwise in Essex between junction 26 Waltham Abbey and 25 Enfield. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:39 and we've got some breaking news to bring you. The British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch, once dubbed the UK's Bill Gates, is one of those missing after the sinking of a super yacht off the coast of Sicily. That's according to a person familiar with the rescue effort. Now, Mike was CEO of the company you will all know as HP Autonomy. He's said to be worth £986.4 million. So yes, Mike Lynch is one of those who is missing after the sinking of this super yacht off the coast of Sicily. This boat sank at around 5 a.m. in front of Porticello in the province of Palermo. Now, we understand that Mr. Lynch's wife may be one of those who has already been rescued. But yes, British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch, one of those missing after the sinking of a super yacht off the coast of Sicily. We'll bring you any more updates as and when we get them.
Now, changing the tone quite significantly, protest flags are banned at the proms, the last night of the proms, as audience members are told that they will be confiscated.
Yes, so the proms website says flags from prescribed groups and flags related to protest, hatred or advertising will not be allowed in the auditorium. So we want to debate whether, firstly, whether, protest flags should be banned, but more, whether we should just have the British flag. Maybe that should be the only one allowed, the Union flag.
Or the British flag plus the flags of the nations of the United Kingdom.
Of the nations of the United Kingdom. Well, we're joined by royal broadcaster and historian Rafe Hadelman-Koo and the broadcaster and social commentator Iman Ayton. Thank you very much indeed to you both for joining us. Rafe, should it only be the Union flag and other flags of our nations that are allowed to be waved at the last night of the proms?
Well, I certainly think we shouldn't be having any protest flags. You know, it's important to have somewhere in our public life that isn't overtly political. Every other public space seems to have been taken over by politics. And the whole point of the last night of the proms is to unify the nation. It's not an official event like, you know, the King's birthday, but it's unofficially a chance for us all to actually come together and have a bit of fun about our great history and celebrate all of that. And I think it's been a shame to see over the past few years politics inserting itself in the shape of the EU flag, which of course we have seen campaigners handing them out outside the Albert Hall. Now, there's nothing wrong with the occasional person waving a Canadian or a Norwegian or a Botswanan flag, but, you know, there are no citizens of the EU. And to have such a, such a sort of a wave of them within the Albert Hall detracts from what should be a very, very uniting and positive event.
Imam, what do you think of what Rafe's just said there? Surely we shouldn't have protest flags. The proms is supposed to unite people.
Well, thank you for having me, Emily and Emma. I appreciate it. Rafe always makes some half-decent points, I'll be fair. So I think it is always about unity. But in order to achieve unity, we do have to include all of the different opinions and thoughts. And so when we think of protests, like protest flags, I don't even know what that is. But a protest flag, if we kind of delve into intellectual terms, it's just people advocating for what they believe in. And if this is a country who claims that they are leading with equality and inclusive behaviours and inclusive in terms of multiculturalism and ethnicities, then we should be taking all of those things into account. And the only way to be unified is to do exactly that. And so when we talk about having different flags, well, I think it's really important to just focus on the first and foremost point, which is that we're talking about classical music here, right? So classical music originated in Europe. It's not British. It never has been British, nor did it start and end with Britain. It actually comes from Europe. Europe has 44 countries. I think of Mozart, who was from Austria. I think of my mum, working class black woman who's very intelligent. She played me music from some random man, some white man called George Handel. And it was a song called The Arrival. Let me just finish, please. It was the song called, if you don't mind, The Arrival of the Queen of Sheba. And if you all know classical music, you will know about this song from George Frederick Handel, The Arrival of the Queen of Sheba. This is what I was taught when I was 10. Hated it back then, as you can imagine. Now, fully appreciate it in this debate. And so more of the tale is, England did not start classical music. It didn't end with England.
I think you're debating. That's very interesting, Iman. But I think we're debating a different question here, Iman, because we need to get back to the flags, Iman.
You didn't interrupt, Rafe. Can I just finish my point, please? Please.
To be fair, his point was shorter.
No, you're right. So I'll just make it very quick. Let's not act as if this is British, it's European. Sorted.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, Rafe, come back to that for us, because I imagine that the proms is wary of, for example, having a Palestinian flag, an Israeli flag, and something, kicking off. They're probably worried about having anything related to any terror organisation, but I imagine that wouldn't happen.
None of those are terror organisations.
Hang on, Iman. I'm going to Rafe now. The EU flag, for example, we've seen a lot of that being waved. Maybe people with the pride flag, etc., etc. I mean, where would you draw the line, Rafe?
Well, can I just say, I have no idea what Iman is talking about. We're not talking about people waving flags at every single classical music concert that is held up let me finish my point, up and down the country. We're talking about the last night of the proms, and the last night comes at the end of the proms seasons. We're doing several hundred concerts in total over that period. If you want to protest, you can just walk outside the Albert Hall, cross the road, and go to Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park and have your protest there. Leave the politics at the door. The Albert Hall is for classical
Politics is
music.
everywhere.
It's a treat, and it's a great British tradition. It's not a great European tradition. It's not a great Palestinian tradition. It's a British tradition. It's a time for us to celebrate. And I'm sorry, but politics has no place within what should be a moment for social cohesion and the nation coming together. The last night of the proms is so popular that it's gone outside the walls of the Albert Hall. So there are separate last night of the proms parties at Hyde Park, in Belfast, in Edinburgh, in Cardiff. The British people know what they like to celebrate, and they don't want to see it demeaned and devalued and debased by having politics and the nasty politics of protest.
Iman, we're just running out of time. Iman, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Europeans and etc. Sorry, Emily. Sorry.
No, Iman. We're running out of time. So 30 seconds. 30 seconds to you to finish your point.
Okay. So, race seems to be very much centred around British people, and it's very annoying when we talk about classical music.
The last night of the
European,
proms.
Mozart was from Austria. I've listened to Mozart. He's great.
Yeah, go to the Vienna Opera. This is London, the last night of the proms.
You didn't want me to interrupt, Rafe. Allow me to finish. I'll keep it brief. I know.
But he's right, though, isn't it? The proms is British.
No. Emma, don't discount what Emily just said. Please don't do that to Emily. Emily made a very valid point in terms of kind of understanding what I was saying, which is if we actually talk about facts, not feelings, not race perceptions, which he likes to lead with a lot. No, we're talking about facts. And facts. Classical music is from Europe, Austria. Handel, who did the arrival of the Queen of Sheba.
Absolutely true.
From Germany. So we want to keep it to Europe. So we want to include all different types of flags, all different types of feelings.
Okay, well, it's a free-for-all in terms of flags for Iman's last night of the proms. And Rafe wants the politics and any flags of protest to be left firmly at the door.
And in Austria, they can wave the Austrian flag, and in Germany, the German flag, and in France, the French flag at their classical music.
I'm going to have to leave it there, Iman. I'm terribly sorry. Rafe, thank you very much. Always a good sport. Rafe Heidelmanku and Iman. She continues.
That's spicy.
Okay, well, this is Good Afternoon Britain. Let us know your thoughts. Should protest flags be left at the door when it comes to the last night of the proms? We've got lots more coming up, so stay with us.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Fatima's UK campaign, Children and Young People Matter. Because I actually run a campaign, and my ministry today is about looking after children in the care system and improving their life outcomes. You know, for me, I had a difficult start to my childhood, and I will never forget it. I mean, I always say I may have left the care system, but the care system hasn't left me. And I instantly understand the importance of giving our young children and young people the opportunity to also, you know, have good life outcomes. So Fatima's UK campaign is all about that. And it's a summit next year. Eamon, I hope you're going to come.
No, I know we've talked about this before, and certainly, I mean, I believe in what you're doing. I think it's marvellous what you're doing, and that's why, you know, when you think about children, and children are so close to you, and you look at that horror that happened in Southport yesterday, I mean, things like that
exactly.
will really hit home hard.
Well, children are the innocent ones, aren't they, Eamon? And this is what we look at when you think they're the future. We've got to start to put them back at the top. And it's a travesty when we see things like that, you know, Omar, that happen. You know, children are the ones that are impacted. And, you know, it's, for me, you know, it's really important to be able to do the best we can and looking after their future. And so hopefully, you know, I'm going to the Pyrenees in September, Eamon. That's my next challenge, the Bay of Biscay from France to Spain and back. And hopefully people can go online, fatimascampaign.com, and give generously to help make a difference to these young people's lives. Because, as I say, children are the future.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 51 minutes past 1. Now, Newcastle University students have been banned from using the Geordie greeting pet after bosses called it sexist.
Yes, so now the word's off limits, according to the university's new 7-page equality guide. So that's very interesting. There are other words as well that have been flagged up. We're now joined by political commentator Anna McGovern. Anna, you're not too far out of university yourself. Did you have these kind of toolkits when you were there? Is pet now an offensive term?
This is something that we're seeing so much more from universities across the UK, where they'll release these language guides advising students about what they can and cannot say and what they deem to be offensive. And at the end of the day, for example, like students going to university, they're young adults, and I think it should be common sense how you should speak respectfully to one another. And I think with the universities, I think they should probably be more focused on actually educating the students rather than what people can and cannot say. It's just another example of them continuing to try to control students' language. I know personally with my university, we were asked to sit these compulsory courses about how we interact and respect one another and about consent as well. And this was actually part of the degree, even though it had nothing to do with what I was actually studying.
But surely, Anna, pet is also gender neutral, isn't it? It's not sexist in any way.
I was just going to say that the notion that it's actually being advised at all by the universities of what we can and cannot say, I just think is absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, personally, I don't find pet offensive, and I'd struggle to find many other students who would particularly care about this either.
And I think you're absolutely right, and I'm just reading that this is a 13-strong inclusion team. So, you know, they've got to find things to do. And these cash-strapped universities know their priorities, Anna. We're going to have to leave it there, sadly. But Anna McGovern, always great to speak to you, political commentator.
Poor Darren Grimes, not going to be able to call anyone pet anymore.
I know, he says it all the time. It's just the Geordie way. Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. I think we might get to some of your views, actually, on that debate we just had over flags at the proms. It got a little bit feisty, a little bit confusing.
Yeah, just a bit.
After your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News. Lots of wet and windy weather to come as we go through this week, and we have already seen things turning pretty unsettled for some of us already today. There is a system coming in from the west already bringing quite a bit of rain across parts of Northern Ireland into Scotland, and we're going to see more rain affecting parts of Northern England, Wales and the southwest as we go through this evening. That rain then continuing its way southeastwards, so although it's largely fine through much of today in the southeast, it is going to turn wet as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. There will be some clear skies following, but also plenty of showers around, and as a result, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, many places holding up in mid-teens Celsius. First thing tomorrow morning, that system is still going to be across parts of the southeast, so quite a cloudy start here, some outbreaks of rain as well, but it will clear away. Elsewhere, yes, there will be some sunny breaks around, but also quite a few showers, particularly across parts of Wales and southwest England, also some showers for northern England too. Plenty of showers for Northern Ireland and down the western side of Scotland. Further east, it's likely to be a bit of a dry, brighter start here, albeit for Shetland there could be some persistent rain around. through the day, really. Once we say goodbye to that system in the southeast, we are going to have lots of showers for many places and, yes, some sunny spells in between the showers, but do watch out for some strong blustery winds, especially towards western coasts. This is where we have the risk of seeing some coastal gales. And all the time, those strong winds are going to make it feel a little bit fresher than it has done of late. Quite an autumnal feel to things at the moment, with temperatures only just about getting into the high teens or low 20s for many of us. More showers to come, particularly across northern and western parts as we go through tomorrow evening towards the southeast. A greater chance of having a fine end to the day. There is likely to be some very wet weather arriving as we go through Wednesday into Thursday, particularly across northern and western parts of the UK. So do stay up to date. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am, having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have saved Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 2 o'clock on Monday, the 19th of August. I'm Emily Carter.
And I'm Emma Webb.
Super yacht disaster. 1 dead and 6 missing after a yacht carrying mostly British passengers is caught in a tornado and capsizes off the coast of Italy. With British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch, once dubbed the UK's Bill Gates, understood to be one of those missing.
And Operation Early Dawn, an emergency plan to avoid overcrowding in jails, has been triggered this morning. The government has announced in the wake of the speedy sentencing of those involved in the recent violent disorder.
And should workers have the right to switch off? Well, workers who are relentlessly contacted by their bosses outside of working hours could be entitled to compensation. Quite a bit of compensation, actually, as the government pushes the right to switch off. should we have the right to switch off? You know, if you're an office worker and your boss is continuously and, in quotes, relentlessly contacting you outside of your working hours, then should you have the right to take them to an employment tribunal and win thousands in compensation?
Well, I don't know. I'm quite bad at switching off and not replying to phone calls and text messages late into the evening.
So it doesn't bother you whether you ignore people?
But I do think, you know, just don't respond, and eventually they'll realise they're not going to get hold of you. If you just decide, after my work is over for the day, I'm not going to read my emails, answer to anything, eventually they'll just stop, won't they?
I mean, if you're a freelancer or you own your own small business, you would scoff at the idea that you could possibly not pick up the phone or not answer an email outside of your working hours or whatever they are, 9 to 5 or something like this. I mean, it's just unrealistic in so many industries, isn't it? And as ever, it's going to benefit lawyers. Yeah. This all benefits lawyers. The more legislation, the more regulations you have on the workplace, you know, lawyers clean up, don't they?
I think many people who run their own businesses, people who are in positions of authority within companies, and as you say, freelancers, people who work in media, for example, you just simply, especially if you're working with companies or organisations in other time zones, you simply cannot just have a cut-off point.
Say no. But if you were on minimum wage and you're working in an office environment and you were signed up in your contract to 9 to 5 and persistently your boss, your manager, is phoning you at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, midnight, whatever, demanding that you reply, demanding that you work, then I think you may have a case. You know, because you're not being rewarded particularly well, so
I think it's different if you have a standard contract like that where you're supposed to be working 9 to 5, you're not in a position of authority, they're just making unreasonable demands on you. But then I think if you're in a position like that, providing that you're not just going to get the sack if you don't respond, then you should just simply not reply.
Well, there is always that. The problem will still be there in the morning. And if you're not saving lives, then how important can it be, really? Anyway, let us know your thoughts. Should you have a right to just switch off out of hours, and should you be able to take your employer down to the employment tribunal to get lots and lots of compensation? Money spinner, perhaps. gbnews.com/your say. But let's get the headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you, just after 2 o'clock, and the top story of the day today. One person has died and 6 are still missing after a super yacht carrying British tourists sank off the coast of Sicily. The British registered 56-metre Bayesian had 22 people on board, including 10 crew and 12 passengers, when it went down after being struck by a tornado. The yacht's owner, the family of the British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch, is believed to be among those who are still unaccounted for. Divers are now combing the waters as search efforts continue around the wreck, 50 metres or so underwater. So far, 15 have been rescued, including a 1-year-old girl. Well, as we look at these pictures of that recovery taking place off the coast of Sicily, let's listen to meteorologist Jim Dale, who told us earlier that the weather in the area was treacherous.
It was a danger zone, so I don't know what the situation was on this particular yacht, whether they had a meteorologist on board or anybody who was trained. But sometimes these things do occur, particularly this type of event. A water spout is quite unusual, so if it hit directly, then it would have been a little bit of a, let's just say, a catastrophic impact, and obviously has been.
Here in Manchester, a 43-year-old woman has died. 2 others are in a critical condition following a triple stabbing in Manchester. A 22-year-old man, believed to be known to the victims, has been arrested on suspicion of murder. The police force there are appealing for witnesses as they continue their investigation into what they say is an isolated incident. Meanwhile, there'll be no punishment for anyone handing zombie knives and machetes into police stations ahead of a new ban. Restrictions are coming into force next month. The government has stopped short, though, of making ninja swords illegal, but insists that will happen soon. Policing Minister Dame Diana Johnson says the public should do the right thing and surrender any dangerous weapons, arguing that there is no legitimate need to have them. Prisons Minister Lord Timpson claims he's inherited a justice system in crisis as plans to address overcrowding in jails have been activated in Northern England. Operation Early Dawn will see defendants who were remanded in custody waiting for a court appearance held in police cells now for longer. It's separate, though, to the early release scheme for some offenders, which kicks in next month. More than half of people think that Britain is heading in the wrong direction, as an opinion poll suggests a drop in support for the new Labour government. An equal percentage of adults have favourable or unfavourable views of Sir Keir Starmer, with 38% on both sides. Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives, meanwhile, their rating hasn't changed since the election. Staying with politics, and the Tory Deputy Chairman, Matthew Vickers, has resigned today. He stepped back from that role to support Robert Jenrick as the next Conservative leader. He says Jenrick is the standout candidate with a compelling vision for rebuilding the party. The Prime Minister insists that support for Ukraine is unwavering after Volodymyr Zelensky suggested the UK's backing for aid was slowing down. It comes after Ukrainian forces destroyed a second bridge in the Kursk region as forces continue their incursion into Russian territory. It's thought that move is aimed at creating a buffer between the two countries. Well, during an overnight address, the Ukrainian president praised his troops for their efforts and also called for the removal of restrictions on donated weapons used against Russia. The Democratic National Convention's kicking off in Chicago later, where Kamala Harris will be officially announced as the party's nominee for the US presidential election. It comes after last month Donald Trump was confirmed as the Republicans' pick, and that was just a few days after he survived an assassination attempt. Americans are heading to the polls in November, and our US correspondent Steve Edgington says that the DNC will be a critical test for the Democrats.
This is unprecedented. There has been Democratic primaries or votes for their candidacy for the last, few decades. And this time around, Kamala Harris has not won any Democratic primaries. She's been installed as the candidate by essentially President Biden and Barack Obama. So this is a real key test for the Democrats. She's almost certainly going to get the candidacy. And she's also chosen her vice president nominee, Tim Walz.
Parents in England are facing higher fines from today if their children are taken out of school without permission. Penalties have now increased to £80 for every 5 days of absence, which will rise to £160 if unpaid within 3 weeks. Nearly 400,000 fines were issued between 2022 and 23, most of those fines for unauthorised holidays. And finally, the remnants of Hurricane Ernesto are set to batter parts of the UK this week, bringing winds of up to 60 miles an hour. A yellow weather warning is in place for rain in Scotland. That covers the southwest of the country from this afternoon, and the northwest for most of Wednesday and into Thursday too. Those are the latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. For now, I'm Sam Francis, back with you at 2:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 2:09, and we're going to start with the breaking news from the last half hour that British tech tycoon Mike Lynch is one of those missing after the sinking of a super yacht off the coast of Sicily.
Mike Lynch, dubbed the UK's Bill Gates, was once the CEO of Hewlett-Packard. He's said to be worth over 986.4 million pounds. Sorry, I can't read numbers out there. He was awarded an OBE for his services to enterprise in 2006.
OK, well, GB News Home Security Editor Mark White joins us now. Mark, finding out that one of the people on board this ship was Mike Lynch, who's a very well-known man, very powerful man.
Yeah, he's incredibly well known in the world of business, of course, being this tech entrepreneur who sold his company to Hewlett-Packard in 2011 for £11 billion, and went through actually a very worrying time for him in the US courts. He had to go and fight a case in the federal court in the US, which he fought and won with an acquittal just back in June. So it may well have been that this trip out around the Mediterranean may have been in that yacht just a way of relaxing and celebrating what had been a very difficult few years for him. It's no mean feat taking on the might of the US federal justice system and coming out on top as he did. So, yeah, very well known and deeply shocking that he is now reported to be one of, we think, at least 4 British nationals who are missing, 2 others missing. The body of a man was found by divers at the wreck site earlier today. That search operation is still ongoing with those dive teams that you can see there on screen going down 50 metres to the seabed to that yacht and searching inside the yacht.
And do we know whether he was there with family, friends? It was quite a large group, wasn't it? 22 people on board? Or 22 guests? We understand that he was with at least some family because there are reports that his wife is among those who survived and was pulled from the water by rescuers early this morning. Also reports, of course, we got of this woman called Charlotte, not further named, who had a young baby, a 1-year-old baby girl called Sophie, and she is reported telling the Republica newspaper that she was thrown into the water, that she held her baby aloft as best she could with her extended arms to try and keep the baby out of the water, was screaming for help, and all she could hear at the time were the screams of other people in the water. And it was a time of a real bad weather, a storm front that was blowing through that had apparently caused this seaborne tornado known as a waterspout, which then engulfed this boat. I don't know if we have the clip of interview from the skipper of a neighbouring boat who was nearby at the time, was also struck by this bad weather front coming through, and he spoke about what he saw at the time.
This morning we got this very strong orkan gust.
Yeah.
And we had to start the engine to keep the ship in an anchor position, and we watched the ship behind us not to touch them.
Yeah.
And we managed to keep the ship in position, and after the storm was over, we noticed that the ship behind us was gone. We saw a red flare.
Yeah.
So my first mate and I went to the position, and we found this life raft.
Yeah.
Drifting.
But anything inside?
With 15 people inside.
15 people
15
inside.
people inside. 4 people injured, 3 heavy injured.
Yeah.
And we brought them to our ship. And then we communicated with the Coast Guard, and after some time the Coast Guard came, and later they picked injured people, and when we 2 hours later they picked up the other people.
Now this happened around 5 o'clock in the morning, and obviously would have caught them unawares. Clearly this captain was there ready to sort of try to steer the ship through it, but as we saw the picture of the yacht, though it is a luxury yacht, is comparably quite small, no match for a water tunnel like that. Presumably they would have been caught unawares, maybe people who had been there for a party, suddenly hit by this in the middle of the night, and perhaps the reason why some of those bodies that have been seen inside the boat, perhaps they were sleeping, it happened so quickly that they were unable to get out.
Yeah, I mean, on a yacht like this, an expensive yacht with a crew of 10 people, there would always have been someone on watch anyway on the deck of that ship in the bridge house. So they would have been as aware of this storm front coming in. Now, the captain of the other vessel was able to start his engine quickly and steer the vessel, his vessel, into the wind, which saved him from capsizing. For whatever reason, the crew on board the yacht, the super yacht, weren't able to do likewise. Now, it might have been that they had noticed it, they weren't able to start the engine up in time, or, you know, it just, whatever the logistics of it meant that that particular vessel took the full brunt of this water spout coming in with its very ferocious winds, of course. And we saw some images actually that were taken around about the same time, 5-ish in the morning, on the shore, just in the harbour there in Palermo, and it was really showing very strong ferocious winds coming through the harbour itself, and just picking up things and catching them on the wind itself. So it was a very significant wind that was blowing, irrespective of the actual water spout that apparently hit the vessel.
And the search and rescue operation continues as we speak. But Mark, for now, thank you very much indeed. Mark White, our Home and Security editor. Now, in other news, in domestic politics, Sir Keir Starmer, he's in Northern Ireland today to meet with police chiefs after at least 20 police officers were injured in the violent protests across the country.
It comes as the government faces a substantial drop in favourability following its landslide election victory last month, with over half of people thinking Britain is heading in the wrong direction.
OK, well, GB News political editor Christopher Hope is in the studio with us now. So let's start with this trip to Northern Ireland. What is the aim of this trip? Yes, what is the aim of this trip?
Well, good afternoon to both of you. He's meeting with the officers from the police service of Northern Ireland. 20 officers have been injured in violent incidents across Northern Ireland in recent weeks. Petrol bombs, bricks. Many of these protests are linked to anti-immigration protests in Belfast and Londonderry, and that's why he's meeting with rank-and-file officers. He has got time in August. He hasn't gone away, the Prime Minister. He's meant to be away last week. Instead, he worked from home in number 10 and also in Chequers. So he's trying to show he's out and about. I think we didn't see him much last week. This polling is difficult news for him. Ipsos Mori poll, the 9th to the 12th of August, they show a post-election drop in perception of him, Angela Rayner, his deputy, and Rachel Reeves. So there's 52%, more than half of people surveyed think his government's heading in the wrong direction. Just 22% think going in the right direction. 19% have no view.
And, of course, the unrest that we've been seeing here in England, in Northern Ireland, we've even seen remarkable scenes of unionists and Republicans marching side by side. People have joked it's the only thing that could possibly unite the Irish is what they perceive as this huge threat from immigration. And that seems to be becoming a much, much bigger issue there, with the typical divide in Irish politics shifting.
That's right. Dougie Beattie, our colleague over there, is often reporting on this, and demonstrations, whether in Belfast or even in Dublin, has been issues too. It's a big concern. It goes across the board, and of course we saw it in the riots in It has been much more serious in Northern Ireland. I think, you know, this does reflect maybe this lack of popularity for Starmer and his team. This narrow support, I think, during the election. Yes, it was a landslide victory last month on election day, but you know, only a fifth of people voted. Adults voted for Labour. 1/3 of those who voted for Labour. So it's very narrow, I think, and that will give some hope to maybe the Tory party that he's not quite Tony Blair.
Yeah, a huge majority, but perhaps a fragile one. People said that on the day, and of course the honeymoon period is very much over. But another massive headache for the government is this issue over prisons and the criminal justice system. The fact that you're now going to have to hold people in police cells, what happens if you then need to make further arrests? And this is all in the backdrop of all of this very speedy sentencing for those who were involved in the recent disorder online and in real life. So it's very tricky. How are they going to be able to project an image of getting it exactly right on these tough, thorny issues?
They've gone halfway there so far. They're holding now prisoners in cells for longer in police stations, but the big problem is going to be next month when they start releasing thousands of offenders early after serving 40%, not 50% of their term. if any of those offenders are released early, and of course, everyone hopes it won't happen, but if any of them were to commit a crime when they should be inside, that is a whole new political issue for the government.
They've mentioned crimes against women and violent offenders, but surely in terms of optics, this adds to the perception of two-tier policing. If you're arresting people and giving them custodial sentences for Facebook posts and misinformation, but at the same time, on the other end, you're releasing criminals early who have done, you know, maybe not violent crimes, but still quite serious crimes. Certainly the public would say far worse than posting something that was unfactual on
It's a clear debate,
Facebook.
Emma. You have got people being jailed for Facebook posts. Some of these people are jailed to try to take it down. They couldn't work out how to delete the post they'd made. You have got you have got the police, the courts working in tandem here to show the state is upset and doesn't want this to happen anymore. And you've got also a prosecutorial Prime Minister who is good at this kind of thing. The harder issue is the politics of dealing with why these things happen in the first place.
Yes, it's understandable that the government, when faced with an outburst of violence, will want to crack down very hard on that violence and those particular crimes to try and stop it from continuing, to send a strong deterrent message. But then if you have other criminals who may not have space in prisons, may not even get into the criminal justice system because of, you know, all the demand from the disorder, it does... It's a tricky picture.
And there are victims watching this happen, wondering why that individual who's caused their family such pain, such hardship, is out after serving 40%.
And already 50%. I think many people were unhappy with 50%, so to reduce it to 40%
it's a hangover. It is a hangover from the last Tory government. There was an issue back in April. Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, was talked about resigning, didn't resign. There has been a ongoing issue, but frankly, building more prisons is an urgent thing for this government now.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We're going to be discussing the prisons crisis a little bit further as more rioters are sentenced to jail. We'll get you the very latest as well on the capsized yacht off Sicily.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles has launched his own aftershave, costing, wait for it, an eye-watering 135 quid for a 100 millilitre bottle, promising buyers that they can smell just like the gardens of his Highgrove country pile. Now, this is something that Meghan Markle would do, surely not the King. Is this a case of King Charles selling out, watering down the brand, just like Meghan? Well, join me now to discuss this is the royal broadcaster, Helena Chard. Helena, welcome to the show.
Martin,
often on this show, we've had a pop at Meghan Markle, the Sussexers, for selling out, for flogging strawberry jam, and now the King is flogging Pong. Is this really the right royal thing to do?
Do you know what? So the joy of luxury Highgrove splash, you know, at the end of the day, Highgrove is such a special place, and the Highgrove shop sells amazing things on there. And as we know, the profit actually goes towards charity. So it's the King's Foundation, which was formed in 1986. Profits go towards educational and training, and it's all to do with this sort of sustainable world. But not to forget as well the charitable aspect and the whole ethos of the King's Foundation, and that's so important. This is not just something that's going up on the website and just being sold purely to go into someone's pocket. So I think, you know, all in all, I think everyone should have a look at the Highgrove website and see what's on for sale. I mean, there are lots of really lovely, I think pretty fairly priced products, and even more so, go and see the gardens. You know, as we know, King Charles is a keen environmentalist, and the gardens are fabulous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 2. Now, emergency measures to ease prison overcrowding have been activated by the Ministry of Justice after hundreds of rioters were charged for their role in the recent unrest.
Yes, this means defendants waiting across the north of England, in particular for a court appearance, will now be kept in police cells until prison space is available.
Joining us now is our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Olivia, isn't this just going to create a bottleneck in the police cells themselves, where they're using these police cells as an overflow for the prisons?
Well, that is very much the worry. Something urgently does need to be done about the overcrowding situation in British prisons. Prisons like to operate with about 1,400 spare places, which allows capacity for if something like, for example, riots happen in the UK and hundreds of people need to be arrested and detained at short notice. At the moment, instead of about 1,400 places available, there are about 300. And prison officials say that if they go below, if they dip below 300 at all, then they simply won't be able to operate. So the situation is dire. The Labour government is introducing this temporary measure, well, we'll see how long it lasts, of holding prisoners in police cells before their court hearings. But as you say, Emma, of course, the danger is that then more people get arrested, and where do they stay? The police cells end up being full, as well as the prison cells. So it feels like the government is sort of storing up problems for itself for later down the line. In the long term, as Chris Hope mentioned a little bit earlier, what the government wants to do, and this will be introduced in early September, is start to release prisoners automatically after serving 40% of their sentence rather than 50%. That might help to ease the overcrowding problem a little bit, though even that isn't certain. But of course, it is hugely, hugely controversial. If one of those prisoners, even just one, commits a crime in the time that they should have been in prison, the spotlight will be on Keir Starmer, and there will be some very, very tough questions. Whether it will even help is another question, because Keir Starmer has had to rightly make it very clear that violent offenders and those convicted of domestic abuse, also the rioters of the last few weeks, won't be eligible for early release. Now, what proportion of prisons are made up of those offenders? And given that none of them will be able to be released early, how much of a difference will this really make?
Yes, and Olivia, Lord Timpson, the prison minister, he's insisted that anyone who poses a risk to the public will not be bailed. But it's not always very easy to know necessarily whether someone who has been arrested may pose a public safety risk. It may be that they've committed a crime, or they allegedly committed a crime relating to theft or shoplifting or whatever it is, but then go on to pursue a violent crime. It's very difficult territory, very dangerous territory the government is in at the moment.
Well, exactly, and we have seen lots and lots of cases as where criminal activity escalates. So someone who starts with perhaps breaking into someone's home and burgling their house would end up doing the same sort of burglary, and if they got interrupted, would be perfectly happy to violently attack the owner of the home. So as you say, there is a pretty big grey area between violent and non-violent crimes. And of course, the danger is that despite the Labour government's best intentions, violent criminals do end up being released early. At the moment, the Labour government is sort of framing all of this in terms of urgency and need. They're saying that they inherited a dire situation from the Conservative government. Prisons are horribly overcrowded, and they've got to do something urgently to ease the problem. But actually, there's more to it than that. James Timpson, the prisons minister, a former cobbler who set up Timpson's key-cutting chain, which helps to rehabilitate prisoners, he has very strong fundamental philosophical views that far fewer people should be spending time in prison. Ideologically, he would rather see a model where far more people are rehabilitated out of prison. Now, how will that go down with the general public? Labour claimed that they were going to be the party of law and order, and we know from lots and lots of polls, both during the election campaign and since, that the public don't like the idea of a government that is soft on criminals. Let's see how that all-important polling for Keir Starmer changes over the next few weeks and months.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Olivia Utley, our political correspondent there in Westminster.
Now, some more breaking news for you on the luxury yacht that has sunk off the coast of Sicily. You can see on your screens now pictures of survivors leaving the Coast Guard building in Palermo, Italy. The surviving passengers, a mix of males and females, were pictured wearing shorts, T-shirts and sandals while walking towards a van parked outside the building.
At this stage, we're not sure of their identities, but we do know that tech tycoon Mike Lynch is one of those who is still missing as this search and rescue operation continues. Again, a reminder that this happened in the very early hours of this morning, 5 a.m. This large super yacht, a beautiful boat, capsizing in a port in Italy, just outside Sicily. So as we see first pictures of some of the survivors from this horrific incident, we'll bring you any further updates as and when we get them on any of those identities of those who have fortunately been saved. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. Later we'll find out why employees contacted outside of working hours could get thousands in compensation. But first, let's get the news headlines with Sam.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom, 32 minutes past 2, and we'll start this half hour with a roundup of that breaking news that a British tech tycoon, Mike Lynch, is among 6 tourists still missing after that luxury yacht sank in a storm off of the coast of Sicily. The super yacht by Essien capsized near Palermo. 15 people have now been rescued, and sadly one body believed to be the boat's chef has been recovered from the water some 50 metres below the surface. Charlotte, a British tourist who survived the wreck, says she held her 1-year-old daughter afloat to stop her from drowning in what she's described as darkness and chaos. The UK Foreign Office says it is in contact with local authorities and is ready to assist those affected. A triple stabbing in Manchester has left 1 woman dead and 2 other people in a critical condition, including a teenager. A 22-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of murder after the attack in the Gorton area last night. Police say they're treating it as an isolated incident, but believe the suspect was known to the victims. And detectives are now appealing for witnesses or dashcam footage. Meanwhile, people handing in zombie knives and machetes to police stations ahead of a new ban won't be punished. Restrictions come in next month, but the government stopped short of making ninja swords illegal, but insists that will happen soon. Policing Minister Dame Diana Johnson says the public should do the right thing and surrender any dangerous weapons. She argues there's no legitimate need to have them. Defendants awaiting court in the north of England will be held in police cells until prison space becomes available as part of new plans to ease overcrowding. Separate measures next month will see some offenders released after serving 40% of their sentences. However, the Prison Governors Association says it's not sure whether the emergency measures will make a difference. The Children's Commissioner says police forces should only strip search a child when it's a life-threatening situation. A report today says there's a new case of strip searching every 14 hours in England and Wales, and 1 in 20 searches don't follow official procedure. The Tories' Deputy Chairman, Matthew Vickers, has resigned today. He stepped back from that role to support Robert Jenrick as the next Conservative leader. He says Jenrick is the standout candidate with a compelling vision for rebuilding the party. America's top diplomat is warning the latest push for a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal is, he says, probably the best and possibly the last opportunity. Antony Blinken's met the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, urging the country towards an agreement. But both Israel and Hamas have accused each other of obstructing ongoing talks. And the final Ted Baker stores in the UK will close, it's understood, by the end of tomorrow. Their website's also been pulled after the fashion chain collapsed, putting more than 500 jobs at risk. Its future was already in doubt when the firm running its UK operations fell into administration in March. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Sophia Wensler will have your next update in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It's definitely going to be a lot more changeable this week with some heavy rain, some strong winds at times, and that's what we're going to see as we go through the rest of today because there is a system pushing in from the west. It's already brought quite a bit of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and then will push into parts of Scotland, Western England and Wales as we go through the afternoon, bringing cloud and rain here. Further east, a drier, brighter story, in fact, across parts of East Anglia, perhaps even Kent, clinging on to some sunshine, and with that sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm. Temperatures here getting to highs of around 25 or 26 Celsius. A much fresher story elsewhere and feeling pretty unpleasant under the rain and with the strong winds towards the north and west. That system, though, is pushing its way eastwards as we go through the end of the day. There may be some drier breaks at times across parts of Scotland through this evening, but it is looking pretty wet, especially across the Dumfries-Galloway area. Here could see some disruption, some localised flooding. The heaviest rain clearing away from Northern Ireland, but staying pretty damp through the evening, whilst that front will be lying across parts of Northern England, Wales and southwest England as we go through the evening, bringing a lot of rain here. A drier story still across parts of the east, southeast for a time, but that rain will eventually push through as we go overnight. Elsewhere, yes, there will be something a bit drier, a bit clearer for some of us, but also some heavy showery bursts, especially across northern parts. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount, especially in the southeast. Here, some places staying around 16 or 17 Celsius. A bit of a cloudy, wet start then in the southeast, but that rain should clear away. Behind it, it is going to be a blustery, showery day for many of us. The strongest winds will be towards the west, and the heaviest showers, perhaps over parts of Scotland, could be the odd rumble of thunder. In between the showers, there will be some sunny spells, but it is going to feel a bit fresher, a bit cooler than today, especially because of those winds. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. We're seeing the usual slowdown in traffic in Manchester on the M61 southbound at the Swinton interchange. Also the usual slow traffic in the West Midlands for the M5 northbound during the M6 at junction 8. Still got delays in Berkshire on the A34 northbound, although all lanes have now reopened after that earlier combine harvester had fallen off the back of a tractor. We're seeing stop-start traffic on the M25 anti-clockwise. Firstly in Essex, we're seeing slow traffic in the roadworks between junction 26 Waltham Abbey and 25 Enfield. Also slow anti-clockwise in Buckinghamshire between junction 17 Maple Cross and 16 for the M40, and also in Kent M25 anti-clockwise slow at the Dartford tunnels. Estimated travel time there around 30 minutes. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
OK, welcome back. This is Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily and Emma Webb. Now, Martin is up next at about 3 o'clock for you, till 6 o'clock. Martin Dobney, what is up on your show then?
Well, is the honeymoon period over for Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party? The data suggests yes. Only 22% of the British public are happy with the direction of travel of the country. 52% unhappy. Starmer's personal popularity going off a cliff, 7 points down since the general election. Is there any wonder when the pensioners are feeling the pinch as the unions get their purses filled up? The jails are filled if you're a Rolex thief or a sex pest, but not if you post Facebook posts that the government doesn't like. Is this the beginning of the end of the honeymoon period? We gave Sir Keir Starmer until Christmas. Perhaps we were generous with that. And it's Monday, another sensational exclusive for GB News. This time, a new investigation shows that the number of illegal immigrants staying at our expense in hotels and on benefits is more than double the official estimate. Almost 100,000 if you take those come on small dinghies and other ways visa overstays the backs of small lorries. 96% of all people coming to this country illegally are staying at your expense in hotels or accommodation near you. And 4 million motorists are getting the bailiffs turn up at their door because of a war on motorists. And guess what? It's not parking fines anymore. It's also clean air zones. Zealotry is driving the working poor to losing their cars. That's coming on my show 3 till 6.
Gosh, Martin, it's very hard hitting. Any light relief?
Yeah, we've got the funniest jokes from the Fringe Festival, which I don't think are very funny. And they're all by men. Is there anything in that? Maybe it's sexist.
Brilliant stuff. Looking forward to it, Martin. 3 o'clock till 6 o'clock, as always, Monday to Friday. It is the legend, Martin Downey.
Definitely hate to say I told you so that the honeymoon period wouldn't last until Christmas, but here we are.
No one likes a smarty pants.
So now workers who are contacted by their bosses outside of work hours could be entitled to compensation as the government aims to give people the right to switch off.
The right to switch off. I wish I could. Anyway, the policy includes the right for staff to refuse to take on extra hours on weekends or to carry out work-related tasks while on annual leave.
Well, now we're joined by behavioural psychologist Jo Hemmings. Jo, is it important, so important, that people switch off, that it should be understood as a right?
Hello. Yeah, I think it should be a right, because I think if it isn't a right, you're going to get employers who take advantage of that. Look, not everybody wants to switch off. Some people love it. They love that technology allows them to be in contact with their work all the time. And other people feel that they may be in danger of losing their job or not getting promotion if they're not, on 24/7. And the net effect of that is the burnout, really, which is horrible. I mean, it's that real sense of depletion, exhaustion, you can't sleep, impacts your relationships. You can't get your life-work balance right because you're not allowed to. So, yeah, in essence, I think it is a right. Yeah.
Jo, I think a lot of us will have an experience of a boss who micromanages to the max and continues to text you or email you or phone you out of hours. And it can have a huge impact on anxiety and stress and the like.
And your family.
And your family and everyone else you're involved with. Your pet might suffer as well. But is this a bit of an overstretch from the government? Because people can leave a workplace, they can break a contract, within reason. They're not forced to stay working for a manager. Or do you think that actually this is the right thing for the government to get its teeth into?
Look, the bit I'm not convinced about is this back pay compensation. So I'm not sure what floodgates are being opened there. But let's say we're talking about it moving forward. Yeah, look, of course you can leave a job if it's unpleasant, but also, you can go to HR if you're having difficulties and feel that you're being asked to do too much or at the wrong times. But I think there needs to be some form of framework in place that says, if you've signed up to do 50 hours a week, 40 hours a week within certain hours, you should be able to keep to that and not be expected to be on call all the time, because it's very difficult, people, as you say, is there relationships that suffer. And I do think something needs to be in place, even if it's a very loose structure that enables people to know when they're being taken advantage of and don't have to leave a job that perhaps they really enjoy in their proper regulated working hours.
Very quickly, Jo, is this a problem that the government can solve anyway, given that we live in the internet age, people are switched on and online all of the time, people might be working with companies in other time zones, and realistically, those people who are willing to go the extra mile are always going to be the ones who get the promotion, who were seen as being more invested in their job.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, for all the legislation in the world, it probably isn't going to alter the way people think. What I'd like to do is think maybe employers will think differently, because actually if they're asking their employees at all sorts of times of day and night to do work, they ultimately become quite unproductive. So it's not in their best interest to do it. So I think it's better coming at it from that end, teach employers something sensible rather than, you know, another law which people may or may not want to comply with.
Yeah, I guess you don't want to go too far the other way and have, you know, employers, bosses absolutely terrified of sending a text or an email out of hours just in case when it comes to the employment tribunal, they sue you or whatever it is.
Especially if it's urgent.
Yeah, if it's urgent, Jo Hemmings, thank you very much indeed for your time. Appreciate it, behavioural psychologist. This is Good Afternoon Britain. After the break, we're going to be asking whether you'd leave your pet your fortune. Will they be written into your will? It's a bit morbid, but I think it's an interesting one. Stay with us.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, we're joined this morning by the broadcaster Paula London, who thinks we shouldn't allow flexible working, and the founder of Real Mums Club, Chrissy Powell, who thinks that it is an absolutely brilliant idea. Let's start with you, Chrissy, because nobody is suggesting for a minute, are they, that being a parent isn't a job?
Parenting a job itself, but I think flexible working, where it really comes into play, is it provides a gateway for those parents that currently cannot work. It provides them a gateway into the working world. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think every single employer should look into that as an option.
It's a fantastic idea, Chrissy, unless you're an employer. I would have thought you can't get people through sickness, through holiday, through when they want to work and when they don't want to work. Why even bother thinking about working? Why not just get paid for sitting at home doing nothing?
Because flexibility isn't just about term time only contracts. I myself, as a working mum, having a flexible employer, it means that I can still continue my work duties when children are ill. Recently, my daughter had a huge allergic reaction. It resulted into an A&E trip. If that wasn't a flexible employee, it would mean I'd have to have time off. Whether that's paid or unpaid, it can be detrimental to the employer and the employee. So by allowing me to work from home and offering more flexibility, employers offer different time scales. So it doesn't always mean that you have to work a 9 to 5 anymore. It might mean that you're best suited to work later on in the evening and pick up your work that way. I just think it's fantastic.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, good afternoon, Britain. Welcome back. It's 2:48, and an increasing number of Brits are now leaving money for their pets in their will.
They're following in the footsteps of celebrities, leaving their million-pound fortunes to their furry friends, including Karl Lagerfeld and Oprah Winfrey.
Well, according to a legal service, 1 in 8 people are now inquiring about including pets in their will. 1 in 8. That is quite a considerable number. We're now joined by the dog listener, Stan Rawlinson. Stan, can you understand why people, when they're writing up their wills, when they're thinking about their assets and what they're going to leave to their family and whoever else, that the pet comes quite high in that priority list now?
Of course, because they're pets, especially dogs and cats,
and that type of thing are family. They are part of the family and therefore can be left at the wills. However, it is important to state at this moment in time, but only in the UK, in England and Wales, pets are considered as assets of an estate and therefore cannot be left as beneficiaries. However, I think this law is going to change shortly, and you can leave while you're alive trusts for your family and everything like that. I'd like to be able to change the law, which I think we are going to, because I petitioned the government about 4 years ago to change the law on how we deem dogs, cats and other animals. And I petitioned them for them to accept sentience in animals. In other words, animals can feel all the emotions we can: love, fear, horror, all the things that we go through, they can. And the government changed the law because I started a change.org and we got 545,000 signatures. Wow. So they changed the law about 18 months ago. So I think they'll be changing the law with regard to an animal as an asset or a dog as an asset. Peculiar enough, a lady in America left a trust fund of £100,000 to a pet goldfish. So in America, it's already,
like a bit
you
of a
can do
statement,
it.
doesn't it? That seems like a bit of a statement, yeah. Don't like my family, I prefer my goldfish.
In Italy, there was a cat called Tommaso that was left in trust. Again, they had appointed a trustee for this £1 million fortune that this cat had inherited. Obviously, the animal can't spend that money themselves. No. So even if you acknowledge the sentience of the pets, you do have to have some way of that money to be spent on the animal. So presumably, you do need some, person to act as trustee.
Absolutely right, and they will be called a caregiver. Yeah, there was an American businesswoman called Leona Hemsley. She's very, very famous, and she left $12 million to a dog called Trouble. And however, that was petitioned in court, and it was reduced down to $2 million. So if you're going to do something like that, make sure you put the money in trust, and therefore they can't go to court and have it changed afterwards. So there's some strange things go on here.
Do you think sometimes it can be a bit of a snide move, though? I'm going to... Your great Aunt Mildred never liked any of you anyway. So she gives all her money to her pet, who then lives it up in the Palace of Versailles, as in the case of Karl Lagerfeld, who sadly died in 2019. Can it sometimes be a bit of a snub?
I think it definitely is. In the case of Leona Hemsley, grandchildren and the other people in her will got far less than the pet did. So it is a snub. And of course, some wills will leave someone a penny, just as a particular snub. So snub is sometimes created, or the wills are sometimes created as a method of getting over the anger that they felt while they were alive.
That's a good point. But reading about how Karl Lagerfeld, known mostly for his job at Chanel, running that fashion brand,
yes.
The cat was given 1.2 million and was last week photographed celebrating her 13th birthday in style with a picnic in the grounds of the Palace of Versailles. I mean, there really is no limit to how much you can spend on a pet, is there really?
No, as long as you put it in trusts and varying other things, you can make sure those animals that you've got looked after well. And in that trust, it would have to state exactly how much they did, and including birthday parties and things like that. Of course, do it. I'm all for it. I've got 5 dogs, and all of them are part of my family. I have family as well on top of the dogs, but my dogs are a very, very strong part of that family.
It's very interesting indeed to talk to you about this. Stan Rawlinson, thank you very much. You are the dog listener.
Would you leave money to Bob the dog?
Well, I'll probably, hopefully, outlive Bob, the dog, but, yeah, my mum probably would. My mum probably would.
Well, hopefully she'll outlive Bob the dog, too.
Yes, well, absolutely, yes. Anyway, if you're listening, Mum, don't go anywhere, because Martin is up next. It's been a pleasure, Emma, as always. But should we get to Spot of Weather with Alex Burkill first?
A brighter outlook with Box Solar. sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News. Lots of wet and windy weather to come as we go through this week, and we have already seen things turning pretty unsettled for some of us already today. There is a system coming in from the west already bringing quite a bit of rain across parts of Northern Ireland into Scotland, and we're going to see more rain affecting parts of Northern England, Wales and the southwest as we go through this evening. That rain then continuing its way southeastwards, so although it's largely fine through much of today in the southeast, it is going to turn wet as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. There will be some clear skies following, but also plenty of showers around, and as a result, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, many places holding up in mid-teens Celsius. First thing tomorrow morning, that system is still going to be across parts of the southeast, so quite a cloudy start here, some outbreaks of rain as well, but it will clear away. Elsewhere, yes, there will be some sunny breaks around, but also quite a few showers, particularly across parts of Wales and southwest England, also some showers for northern England too. Plenty of showers for Northern Ireland and down the western side of Scotland. Further east, it's likely to be a bit of a dry, brighter start here, albeit for Shetland there could be some persistent rain around. Through the day, really, once we say goodbye to that system in the southeast, we are going to have lots of showers for many places and, yes, some sunny spells in between the showers, but do watch out for some strong blustery winds, especially towards western coasts. This is where we have the risk of seeing some coastal gales, and all the time those strong winds are going to make it feel a little bit fresher than it has done of late. Quite an autumnal feel to things at the moment, with temperatures only just about getting into the high teens or low 20s for many of us. More showers to come, particularly across northern and western parts as we go through tomorrow evening towards the southeast, a greater chance of having a fine end to the day. There is likely to be some very wet weather arriving as we go through Wednesday into Thursday, particularly across northern and western parts of the UK, so do stay up to date. Bye-bye.